Okay, it is 5:15, October 6th, 2021, and this is the meeting of the County Commissioners of Androscoggin County. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And all commissioners are present.
The next thing should not actually,
Yeah,
She
I'm
did not
thinking
take
that
that
is a
off, and that
mistake,
needs-
isn't it? The preliminary budget,
Yeah,
we haven't
no.
gotten it back from the Budget Committee yet.
that'll be the next one.
Okay, thank you. So we will skip right down to number 5, accept and approve with a waiver of the reading of the minutes of the September 15th meeting. Motion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
first of all, I think we should just vote to skip that item on the agenda. I think that's the proper procedure. So I make a motion to skip the Section 4 finalized preliminary budget.
That will automatically come to you in the November 3rd meeting. It's
Yep.
already on the schedule.
No, it's just procedural.
May I ask you to hold?
If there's no second, we can skip it.
Yeah, but we've got a motion and a second. I'm just the people that made the motion. Do you mind if we backtrack a little bit to take care of number 4?
Sure.
Thank you. So Commissioner Larry is making the motion he'd like to skip number 4. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, now we have a motion and a second on the, to accept and approve the waiver of the reading of the minutes. Okay, all in favor?
Madam Chair, do we have a motion or?
Yeah, we have a
Oh,
motion
went
and
that- okay.
a second.
Madam
and we
Chair,
waited for comment.
then I request the minutes to reflect under 6, after your statement saying that I publicly criticized an employee. I responded, since you stated that I criticized an employee, I request the opportunity to correct that statement. I did not mention any employee by name on purpose. Second of all, the staff member that I will assume you're speaking of is not even the one that has the responsibility to make sure that the minutes are kept accurately. There is a job description that the commission has that actually states who is responsible for that, and I think it may even be included in the bylaws as well. Just to clarify, I am very pleased that now instead of interjecting opinions in the minutes, we will now receive letters from employees, which will be a much more appropriate manner for this. Second of all, under new business 8, I am misquoted. It says, but I don't think the federal government's forgiveness. I said, but I don't think the federal government should be giving us money that we've already that they've already taxed us to use. Third point, then the statement under 10, future agenda items, right after Mr. Post's comment, I state, Madam Chair, the bylaws state that the chair may not unduly delay placing items on the agenda, and the lawyer told us that we could add this to the agenda. So you don't have any legal leg to stand on, Madam Chair. So it is up to you whether you put that on the agenda, and I would note that this commission can be forced to follow its own bylaws by a court. Would that be necessary, Madam Chair? If this is not added, this allows just the quote of Mr. Post to give the impression that his statement on the bylaws was final, which, with all due respect to Mr. Post, as commissioners, it's up to the commission to decide, not the administrator. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not, could you give me the wording that you would like changed on, I need number 10 right now is where I'm at.
Yep. I've printed them both out.
Oh, perfect.
The only one that I did not print was number 8, but I don't think the federal government should be giving us money that they've already taxed us to use.
Okay, so Commissioner Larry has made a motion on these changes. a second on that motion?
Madam,
Second on that motion?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay.
May I speak?
Yes,
So the
absolutely.
gentleman is saying that he was misquoted in the bylaws, in the minutes?
yes, sir.
All right.
In section 8.
Then I'm fine changing it.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of changing the minutes to reflect the statement that Commissioner Larry has passed out? Opposed? 7-0.
Madam Chair, just to check, the 3 statements, correct?
I
Just you
only
stated
received
singular.
one statement.
Well, there are two,
2.
yeah.
There's 2 papers.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Okay. Yep.
2 statements and 1 verbal, thank you.
Okay, warrants, review and approval of all bills, part-time deputy payroll.
Madam Chair, I move to approve payroll warrants 2134 and 2211J.
Okay. A second to that,
Second, Roland.
and discussion about the warrants and the bills and the payroll. Oh, seeing no discussion. All those in favor of approving the bills, part-time and part-time deputies payroll? Opposed? Okay, that is 6-1. Okay, let's move on to the reports. Was there an MCCA meeting in the last couple days, Mr. Poirier?
There was no meeting, sorry.
Thank you. Commissioner Kelly, Central Maine Workforce Board?
I have nothing to report at this time, Madam Chair.
Administrators report, Mr. Post.
I will only bring up just a couple of things. As you know, we've been meeting with Budget Committee. Their proposal for the public hearing is in your packets. We've been dealing with that for the last few weeks. Clarice, I have talked with, and Clarice and I met with the social service agencies regarding the ARPA funds and something that may be coming before you in the future. After the census has been completed, I did receive the proposed commissioner districts, and those are in your packet, but we don't have any detail concerning, the written detail yet, just kind of a map. And I'll just report that we were tied for #1 in the Risk Pool Safe Driving Award, and I received the check yesterday.
Yay,
Awesome.
that's wonderful. Questions for the administrator? Yes, go right ahead.
Not sure if this is the appropriate time, but 3 of the commissioners went to training regarding emergency management. And one of the items that came up was who can declare an emergency within the county? And again, I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time, but that was brought up. Ironically, Brian and I were sitting next to each other, and we both looked at each other with that look of said, we don't know who's authorized to declare an emergency at the county. Can you enlighten us on that? And what are your powers at that point, or who has that power, and what powers do they have? How well is that defined?
Okay, I'm going to have to get back to you on that, because the different definitions of emergency, I can't declare normally emergencies are declared through the state. And it is very seldom, if ever, that an emergency can be declared on an individual county-wide. That's normally done through the state, so.
Because they talked about towns also declaring emergencies.
Madam Chairman?
Go right ahead.
I attended that also, and my question was precisely addressing this. If there is a local emergency, do we have procedures on who makes a decision? What's the pecking order for the chain of command for, let's say, the dam, for instance, all those pictures we saw in the center, if the dam at Gulf Island bursts, who declares an emergency, who is responsible for declaring an emergency, and what is the pecking order if that person is in Korea? Do we have a plan?
We'll get that to you.
Let me ask you, gentlemen, this. We can't next meeting because it's going to have to be a very light agenda because of the budget hearing.
It's not an urgent matter.
But would you like would you like the EMA director to come to a meeting sometime and have a discussion about that? It just won't be able to be the next meeting is really,
Takes her, or if it, or Larry.
She and I will have the
Yeah.
discussion. and
Yeah, I
we'll-
don't-
we'll get something.
I'm not I was not looking for an answer tonight. I mean, if you had one, yes, but I have no problems with him. I'd rather say, get the correct answer than not have the right, and I don't have a time
It could
limit.
even be in writing.
okay,
Madam Chair.
yes.
Also,
Larry?
I'd like to know, keying off of that, what protections are in place to either end an emergency, amend, or restrict that? What checks and balances are in place as the county commissioners? I just want to make sure, as representatives of the taxpayer, that there are checks and balances in place to protect individual freedoms and constitutional freedoms, as long as religious freedoms. Thank you.
Okay, anything else for the administrator?
Chair. Administrator Post, how many employees do we have on the governmental side, whatever is not under the sheriff's responsibility? I realize it may not be down to the individual.
I could have told you exactly if you hadn't asked me, but now that you've asked, I'll have to get back to you on that.
Any
But
ballpark,
it's- Oh, we have a total of like 140. There's 65, 70, probably 70.
Okay. And do we have any plans in regards to Biden's mandate for injections? Have we begun discussions with employees or begun asking employees in regards to that?
We are not at this point.
Good. That would be a policy requirement that would need to be voted on by the county commission. Thank you.
Okay, anything else for the administrator? Okay, on to the comments from the public. There was a delegation that were planning on coming from Leeds. I'd like to ask them to come. They're going to talk to us a little bit about broadband and the situation they have in Leeds on broadband. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I just want to introduce myself. I'm Jan Wigman. I'm a selectman for the town of Leeds. And with me here today is Joe McLean. He's a member of our broadband committee. We wanted to come before the county commission to talk about potential funding source for a broadband project that we're looking at doing. Back several years ago, the town recognized that we had real gaps in our broadband network within the town. And so we banded together with some other towns, looked at mapping that situation, trying to get our hands around it and study it. We were able to do that. We hired a consultant, and we found that about 30% of the homes in the town did not have access to broadband. And then as we came into this pandemic and the schools had to go remote, we heard from the schools that there were situations where it was real difficulty getting the remote learning to students and teachers and so forth within the town. We heard issues with telemedicine. We heard issues from our own citizens saying that they didn't have real access that they needed to work from home or to have a business from home. So we continue to work on that process. We have developed put out an RFP to service providers to service the underserved or the unserved areas within the town with broadband, and developed a plan or a path forward that would bring broadband fiber network to the underserved areas and the unserved areas operated by a third party. And the project we've developed would be funded in part by ARPA funds from the community. It would be funded, we would like to request some ARPA funding from the county for the broadband to help get that initiative implemented, as well as the New England Clean Energy Connect broadband funding that they have would also be used, as well as the Connect Maine Authority potentially from that. And then there's obviously, that doesn't fund the entire project. We'd have to bond a portion of the project. But even with the bonding, we've worked out a solution where the overall project would be self-funded with the user fees of the people that would connect to it. So it does not add to the tax burden as long as we can get our funding sources aligned. And that's one of the requests we'd like to see or discuss with the county in terms of getting a portion of the ARPA funds that might come to the town of Leeds to fund that particular project. And and Joe here has a little bit more information for you as well.
If you don't mind, I've got a map of the proposed improvement areas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, just to add a little bit to what Jan noted, I think it's an important point that we identified this well before the pandemic as a problem in our community. The pandemic certainly exacerbated it and really highlighted it, and frankly brought funding to the table in the way of ARPA and some of the Connect Maine dollars to help address it. We think we're well positioned as essentially a shovel-ready project for those funds. If you look at this map, you'll see there's a lot of red and there's a lot of blue. Ultimately, the blue areas represent the cable broadband infrastructure in our community, which is largely where the bulk of our population lies. And one of the reasons we have to kind of have this burden of this blue area is because it's a fairly undeveloped portion of town. And ultimately, the cable company was not about to make those investments with such a low density of population. And that's ultimately one of the biggest problems with broadband access is you have things like the electric utility and the telephone utility, which are required to provide service to all residents. Internet providers are not required. There's no regulatory requirement. Ultimately, it's up to us that the funding structure has been developed as such to incentivize and provide subsidy through the federal government to these areas, these rural areas like our area here in Leeds, to make this happen. So no one else is going to do this for us. Spectrum is not about to go build this out for us on their own. We have to do it ourselves. But you also notice that those bold red lines are effectively areas of our town that don't have broadband internet. We're not trying to compete with the other internet providers. We're not trying to overbuild service. We're just trying to provide service to folks that don't have it currently. The overall project at one point in time was about a $4 million project to provide fiber to the entire town. And we've cut that back significantly, as Jan noted, to ensure that we could take a project that would not add to our tax burden and would also not be competing with private businesses in town, like Spectrum.
Yes, go right ahead.
Who will own the internet service provider?
Yeah, so the infrastructure itself would be owned by the town of Leeds, okay? We've partnered, we put out an RFP, as we noted before, and we had several respondents, including Spectrum. We were actually hoping to have Consolidated respond, but they did not. But a company called GWI also responded, as well as a company called Axiom. Axiom is ultimately who we're looking to partner with here. They're a small company from Machias. They are essentially going to be our contractor to build the network. And they will also be our contractor to operate the network after construction. But we will own it as town of Leeds. We will borrow to build for it. We also hold the insurance associated with it afterwards. And so it would be municipally owned. The agreement that we've looked at with Axiom now as well has essentially a kick-out provision to be reviewed every few years. If Axiom is is not performing the way we feel, there are other providers that we could also contract with to operate in the future. But, so no additional town staff needs to be hired. We'll continue to be able to operate this into the future with this contractor.
So I may continue. So this would be similar probably to the relationship you have with the cable people and the blue lines, where you can't, the city owns the telephone poles and stuff on,
Unfortunately, one of the challenges we have with the private model, Spectrum owns all of that infrastructure themselves. And they, there's no municipal control over anything that they're doing.
but as far as just Spectrum is your cable?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
How much are you seeking from the county fund-wise?
So we took a look at the, the entire award the county had, broke it down by population. And so the Leeds share of that, if you did it by population, is something in the magnitude of $450,000. And that's what would be like, that's what we're requesting.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go right ahead.
So the purple is called expansion area of the Spectrum system.
Correct.
So where are they now? Are they in limbo?
Yeah, that's a very, it's a very astute point there. Our project also, we did not want to leave anyone out. We wanted everybody in town to be able to have access to broadband. Unfortunately, some of those purple areas are very far removed from some of the other areas, and it made much more sense to continue to partner with Spectrum to just extend the cable into those areas.
Right.
And so we have a deal structured loosely right now with Axiom to build the red fiber. We also have proposals from Spectrum to do those small expansions.
Okay,
So currently they're where the blue is,
great,
okay? And the purple would be an expansion of cable.
okay.
I just want to add, I think Leeds is in a really unusual, unique for the county position. Minot is also struggling. I don't know if it's to the magnitude that Leeds is. And just to add to what you're saying, Leeds is not a community that has a lot of commercial or business partners, but yet they have school children that, were unable to log on. So I just wanted to add that. Yes, go
Well,
ahead.
My question would be, why does the county have to be a partner in this if the other funding sources could take care of it?
Well, that's the crux of the situation is in developing our financial model for this, we accounted for the county being a part of it. That really gets us a long ways towards not having this project be a burden on the taxpayers.
There's a lot of pieces that are challenging with this. For instance, the Connect Maine Authority is also someone we're going to really be relying upon to help us. They have requirements such as how much service can cost and other pieces that affect the longer-term financial model, which we would be using to pay back the bonds and how much we can borrow. So if the county isn't a partner, we'll be faced with the choice of cutting back the project or adding to our local tax burden. And we're really trying hard to continue to have the project scope now that you see, because it does get to everyone that doesn't have broadband right now. And we really are not, we're really hopeful not to have to raise taxes on the residents.
So what's our exposure, given the territory that the county covers from other towns in the future? If we say, sure, and then others come over and we say, maybe, and others come over and we say, no, I mean, how much of an obligation do we have to help fund broadband? Is that clearly in our purview?
With the ARPA funds, it is one of the areas that was carved out. They carved out in the beginning, I think it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Proctor, I think they carved out 4 areas when they first sent it out. Now they've carved out where they've distinctly set aside 6 areas. Is that right? Do you agree with that? Yeah. And one of them is helping the community with broadband.
So would this be a bond? Would this be a loan that would be paid back over 10, 20 years with fees? Or how does that work?
Steve, can ARPA funds be loaned out? Because when the funds first came out, I was sort of wanting to go that direction, but I think I got cut off pretty quickly when I looked into it, yeah.
But specifically the way okay, Larry, go ahead. You wanted to say something.
I know some of the other counties and, you know, some of the municipalities are under the impression that the state had gotten through this ARPA money $1 gazillion that they're giving out for broadband. And so there's a feeling out there amongst my colleagues that the state has way more than enough money to, if you can address that.
So far, the state has capped awards to 25% of project cost. And so we're assuming we're gonna get that 25% in our modeling right now, and there's no reason to expect anything more than that from them. So as much as they've had awards, there's a big need in the state as well, and Connect Maine is trying to give to everyone as well, and they've been capping at 25% so far.
And the total cost again of your project?
Our project, and the biggest cost is the construction, really, and it's about $2 million.
So you're saying the state would be coming up with 500,000?
Potentially, right. I mean, right now, everything is a bit in flux. Like I said, depending on how much we can, get awarded from the county, is probably the biggest variable we have in this project. Because that 450 can go a long way towards that project. And if for somehow it doesn't come through, then again, we'll be looking at a more difficult choice of cutting back or raising taxes.
So the challenge that we have sitting here as a commissioner is that we have 14 communities. And if we give you that sum of money, I've got 13 others that are going to ask for the same amount of money, which leaves the county with no money for its projects that we're hoping to also address, such as our heating and cooling system. So I'm not sure that, I'm not seeing how we can even do this to that extent, other than unless we want to change our way. But we've already we've already spent some of our monies. And I guess, Larry, you have something to add to that.
Madam Chair, I guess I would propose that you put a request in writing to us, and we will certainly put that on the list and, see where it can fit and if it can fit. But, give us a proposal and get it to me and we'll go from there.
Mind if I comment on your statement? I mean, I think, again, we are looking at it by population. So we are trying to not ask for more than our share, but we also recognize that there are other projects going on, like the HVAC systems and the courthouse improvements and all of those things. So, really, I guess what I would say is we're asking for as much as we can. And it is a significant impact on our project. So.
Oh, I fully understand you're asking. I would be doing the same if I was sitting on your side of the podium today. But I'm just honestly telling you, some of the money has already been spent on projects for the county, which will help reduce property taxes evaluations to all the communities. And therefore it gets divided, I don't want to say more evenly, but it's spread out among all 14 communities. So that will be one of our challenges. But again, yes, put it in writing and we'll gladly see what we can do, or at least I'd like to see what we can do.
Commissioner Larry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This isn't specifically focusing on the town of Leeds. Obviously, I think a number of towns would probably be interested in this or other projects. But I guess my main concern is much of this spending, it keys in on what you're asking for, but this is not, speaking of the town of Leeds, but much of this is based on decisions made by the governor, by school boards to meet remotely and not using constitutional methods to do so to begin with. So we are in a challenge of trying to spend money that really shouldn't even need to be spent, and sending remote school to children that shouldn't even have to have that because of these actions. So I don't criticize you, but I'm just stating my concerns with this. I certainly respect what you're, it makes sense to ask us. But that's, running back to the root cause, which is very critical, it should be up to the school boards to decide this, and that's never really been the case. So this is once again, just a real overreach, and now we're having to spend a whole bunch of more money trying to do this. So I appreciate you gentlemen sharing, but I'm concerned.
I'll just add, I don't necessarily disagree with anything you just said, but in addition to, say, the schools being remote, it's simple household connectivity.
Yep.
Economic development. I mean, I run a business in town, very challenged on the current DSL service that we have. And in fact, we put out a survey to, we got over 100 respondents. Those folks that had cable service were generally satisfied 2 out of 3. Those folks that had consolidated DSL service were generally satisfied 1 out of 10. So dramatic problems with the internet service. It wasn't just the school system. I guess that's all I'm trying to add here.
Understood.
It's a real problem.
Yeah, and I appreciate, obviously every public person has every right, full well, to disagree with any of us. But no, thank you for sharing your thoughts and for speaking with us, or at least I speak for myself.
We work through the ARPA funds issues. If there's other questions, Jan, I usually get a hold of you through the county, through the clerk, town clerk. Is that the best way to get a hold of you also, Joe? Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, we also
Sure.
have a gentleman here from Minot that I'd like to recognize. Did you want to?
Actually, I came for another issue.
Oh, okay. That's fine, all right. Any other public comment then?
I guess I'd like, if I could.
Sure, go right ahead.
So, I'm not sure how all this stuff works. I don't usually do a lot of this kind of stuff, public speaking, go to government stuff. But I'm basically concerned about where we're heading with mandates and stuff. I have 2 children in school, and I want to try to get ahead of whatever could possibly get to them. So, is there anyone that can offer me any kind of guidance about how I can go about to see what our state, what our local government is doing to help the people who are against the mandates? Does anyone point me in the right direction? Am I at the right spot?
Well,
Yeah, once you feel that one.
There are no, what are the mandates now? Are there any mandates yet? Are they just talking about it? I'm mostly talking about like the vaccines, if the mask.
yeah, but have there been any, there've been no declaration of mandates yet, have there? Requiring vaccines?
There's one by the
Andy?
state that is not being enforced until the 29th. And that's on the
Yeah, medical,
Yeah.
yeah.
The injection mandate for the nurses and EMTs, and I think even medical dispatch. So I think that even applies to our staff, if I'm not mistaken.
It doesn't just apply to your staff, it also applies to construction workers, and that's why I'm here. So after that gentleman's done, I'd like to have a public comment.
Sure. It's a legislative matter, unfortunately. And we sometimes have issues that are suggested here at the commission, and we have no more authority to override the state than, say, I like to mention the school boards do. So sometimes I say to people, well, you could bring that issue to the school board, and they look at me like, what do you mean? I says, well, we're just the county commission. We're limited in our authority by the state constitution as to what we can do, what we can cover. So we can't, unlike some states where the counties are very powerful, especially out west, here we're not really, our assignment is very specifically designed. So it's a state matter, is all I can say. Okay, with respect to that, I was actually supposed to be going to a school board meeting tonight to not protest, but speak my mind on mandates for masks, which we've just gone to universal mask in our issue. We spent 2.5 weeks on a plan, and we went to universal mask. So unfortunately, I'm being forced into speaking up about all this, and I'm looking to you for some help and guidance. Now, I'm not asking you to turn over a rule or anything. I'm asking you, how do we get the steps going? I understand some of the southern states, their senators are just taking the bull by the horns and getting it done. How do we approach that? I heard something about asking for a resolution to condemn this to be put on the schedule. Is that something that would help us take the next step?
No,
We have no power.
If you want to actually make a true difference, contact your legislator. I mean, we can make a fluffy resolution, but it's not gonna matter.
Okay, like I said, unfortunately, tonight, I'm not really prepared to see exactly what you guys can do. I was supposed to be at a different meeting. That one got canceled for some reason. I found out about this in the last minute. And I was under the impression that a resolution to condemn the unconstitutional injection mandates by the governor and the president should be requested to be put on the agenda for next meeting so that I can see the ball start rolling as locally as possible. Are you saying that that's something that even if it gets put on the agenda, it's not gonna help?
Madam Chair?
But
yeah,
definitely, if you
Madam
talk to
Chair.
your, definitely if you talk to your legislators, they're the ones that actually have the power. I mean, I hope most everybody on this board has contacted their legislator because we have some of the same issues. And coming down the road, it could affect us the same way. Definitely contact your legislators and make sure they know how you feel about the issues.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Larry?
Thank you. That's inaccurate because we can pass resolutions while they do not have teeth. Those raise public awareness. There are 2 lawsuits that are in play by MaineStandsUp.org and Liberty Counsel, both of them good lawsuits in my opinion, though I'm not a lawyer. And those are helped by taking steps to pass a resolution. We've passed a resolution voted by everyone here that was a commissioner at the time, and against Governor Mills basically closing down the entire state back, last year. That was introduced by Commissioner Michaels, chairman at the time, and supported almost unanimously. I think it was 6-1, myself supporting it as well. So we have done that before, and we do have the authority to do so. And if it's such a floppy resolution, I would encourage other commissioners to put forth a better language. However, we have a responsibility to speak up. Even if we can't stop something, we can at least speak up. Second of all, we have the ability to put forth an important question to the Maine Supreme Judicial Court. There is precedent for that. Back in 1880, a election committee was dealing with a crisis of which legislature would be seated. They submitted an important question to the Maine Supreme Judicial Court, which was not obligated to answer it because they weren't not a bona fide legislative body, but the Supreme Judicial Court did step out, so to speak, and recognize that, given the exigencies and the emergency that was going on. So you have every right to speak here, and the Commissioner at least consider doing that.
Back to public comment, and you'll certainly have time at the end for your comments. And I appreciate you coming in and stay vocal about it.
Okay, I
And
don't want to take up any more time than needs to be, but I think he hit a lot of things, and I think it's about making the noise that we need to make. I think it's very important that we all have choice, and right now, my choices are being taken away. And as a parent for 2 little children, my choices are being taken away. Now, I don't want anyone to be forced to wear a mask. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. But I should have the choice. And as far as the vaccine goes, I'm very much the same. I'm not anti-vax, I got vaccines. That's a different story. I just feel that if there's something that can be done, if we can get the voice heard, we need to move on this. And I know there's a lot of people who feel this way, and I just found out about Litchfield's volunteer fire department. I know Sabattis, we just had to vote for our police officers to stay in. I don't know what's going on, because I try not to get involved in this. I got my own stuff that I do, people that do this. I respect what you do, but on the same hand, I feel that it's going the wrong direction and getting out of hand. So I'm trying to go to anyone that will listen and say, what more can I do? I can't be just one voice. I know there's a lot of people saying what I'm saying, and I think one gentleman's probably more prepared to speak than me. Can fill us in more on that. But if there is something that can be done, I'd like to see us moving on it. And if it's a matter of bringing it up on the next agenda to continue the conversation, I'd like to see that.
thank you very much. Before you leave, Commissioner Michaels has something, and I should have asked you at the beginning, your name and your town for the record.
Sure, my name's Derek Willett,
Thank you.
and I've lived in Wales for over 36 years.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Go ahead.
Derek, Wales is part of an SAD?
Yeah.
How does the school board stuff work there?
Not good.
I mean,
moved back to Wales
the
after-
structure of it is, Wales doesn't have just its own school board, it's part of a SAD board?
We're an RSU. We're an RSU with Litchfield, and Sabattis and Wales. We're all one group.
Okay, so regarding the masks, for instance, I noticed that Portland voted whether or not to require masks for the kids, and it failed to pass because it tied 4-4. That means no action was taken. Now, when the swing vote gets elected, maybe they'll switch back
Can
some
I
other
ask,
way.
are you saying the board voted on universal masking for the children?
Quite sure, yeah.
Okay, and that's what you're saying tied 4-4?
Yeah, in other words, even Portland didn't pass masking at this point. So I would think your SAD would not.
You would like to think that, but things aren't always what you think today, and they just did it 2 weeks ago.
They did.
And we were in a plan where we were red, yellow, green. We were in green to start the school. We got into yellow quick, and my wife didn't want to start the kids in school. And I pushed for the opportunity because I figured we were gonna follow the plan. And when we hit red, my girls would be out of that school and remote learning. This broadband stuff we were just hearing about that I got late for. Unfortunately, we abandoned the plan. We never went to red so we could have the remote learning. I would rather my kids at home learning remote, because we can do that, we were fortunate, our kids are adapting to that, than have to go to school and be forced to wear a mask. So, I appreciate you informing me about Portland, but unfortunately, our board, I think, was 7-2 vote. And a lot of our board just pops up last minute. I was supposed to be there tonight, and they changed it last minute. So, I thank you for sharing that information. And I'm gonna try to look into it a little bit more, but our school board has voted on it, which is disappointing when we had a plan that we were supposed to follow. 2.5 weeks into the school year, we didn't follow.
Unfortunately for you, that's your leverage point there, the school board, so keep focusing on that and run some candidates.
Madam Chair?
Mostly
Thank you for
school
coming.
boards are
I
ignored.
appreciate it, Derek.
Mostly school board elections are ignored, unfortunately, you know.
Yes, all right, thank you.
For coming. Other public comments?
Don Dubek from Minnet. I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of the old saying, all politics is local. It starts locally. I'm one of the owners of Landry and Son Acoustics. We have 23 employees that work for us. We do a lot of schools, hospitals, doctors' offices. We're doing 2 projects at Mercy Hospital. We're doing St. Mary's C4, which is the adult ward. And we're doing a project at the Eastern Maine Medical Center, and we're working up the Northern Maine Medical Center up in Fort Kent. We've been sent a letter by 3 of the hospitals, St. Mary's, Mercy, and Northern Light, saying that we have to have our employees vaccinated by October 28th. Thing about that, with the 23 employees, we have 1 vaccinated, and I will not force them to get vaccinated. If we have to lose some of our work, that's just the way it's gonna be, but it's not right. You take a look at the quote from Thomas Jefferson, one of the founders of our Constitution. And he stated, and I'll read it directly, "There is no justification for taking away individual freedoms in the guise of public safety." Point blank. There's many choices to make in this world, and I will pass you along a report that you don't see in the media, but this just came out not too long ago, and you guys can do your homework on it. This is a report from India, showing that one of their states, they have states
Yeah.
like we do.
241 million.
Yeah, they had a state that had a rampant,
Thank you.
thing of COVID going along, 230 million people. What they did was rush out and started, and I'll read a part of it for you. The WHO government team was moving across 97,000 villages in 75 districts over 5 days. This activity, which began May 5th in India's most populous state with a population of 230 million. The activity involved an aggressive house-to-house test and treat program with medical kits. The WHO explained each monitoring team had 2 members who visited homes in the villages and remote hamlets to test everyone with symptoms of COVID-19 using rapid antigen tests. Those who tested positive were quickly isolated and given a medicine kit and advised on disease management. The medicine kit comprised of a kit that was not identified as part of the Western media blackout at the time. And as a result, the comments were secret to the source as the sauce at McDonald's. The WHO continued on inaugural day, the WHO field officers monitored over 2,000 government teams and visited at least 10,000 households. The news story was published on the WHO official website in India. The website details the WHO's work against COVID-19 from India, including the discussion on their online course of rapid response teams. Such teams were very government teams discussed with the assignment to conduct a house-to-house test and treat with the utter Prashad, or however you pronounce it in India. The discussion of the role of rapid response team, the WHO reports. The key component of the larger emergency response strategy is at the essence to the efficient and effective response. The WHO produced the publication, this course with RTA, working at the national, sub-national district, and sub-district levels to strengthen the pandemic response with the support of the National Center of Disease Control. I won't read the whole thing to you, but this province only had 3% vaccinated rate. They are now COVID-free. They are a state that's COVID-free. You know what was in the medical kits? Ivermectin. You got hydroxychloroquine, that works, right here from the NIH, back in 2005. So why are we limiting it to one? To one issue, just the vaccine, which is making these companies vast amounts of money. That kit costs $200 per household. That's it. You know, and you've got all these people that would say 230 million people, and they're COVID-free. Not only that, you can't tell what this vaccine does to other people that have different diseases, whether they have Crohn's, Lyme, whatever. They don't know how it reacts because it's not been around long enough. Look at when look at the company that's getting sued for Roundup. It's been out for how long? And now they finally find out that it's causing cancer. They're getting sued. So now you're trying to force everybody to take a vaccine that they don't need to. There's other symptoms. There's vitamin C, there's vitamin D, there's zinc, there's silver colloid that you can take and not have an issue. This is a free country. There's other issues. You want to buy a Ford, you buy a Ford. You want to buy a Toyota, you do whatever. It's a free country. Everything starts locally. We should pass this resolution.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Public comment, yes, ma'am. If I could just get your name and your town real quick?
My name is Pat Zebley, and I live in Lewiston. And I'll make it quick. I'm just here to ask that you put the resolution about the vaccine mandate on the agenda for your next meeting, I believe it's October 14th or 16th?
20.
20th, I'm sorry. So I believe that it's the American way. Get input from the citizenry. People are up in arms about the vaccine mandate. Whether you want it or not, that's up to you. That's an individual thing. To be forced to take it, to be forced to take it to have a job, to be forced to take it, now, what are they going to do next? You can't get any food unless you get vaccine. I mean, it's incredible. You might look like you're incredulous.
Well, I don't understand food and vaccine.
California.
Yeah.
California's doing this.
Let's,
They just denied some lady getting a kidney transplant because she didn't take the vaccine.
That's right.
It was in the news.
This is insidious, what is going on. It has nothing to do with freedom, nothing, and everything to do with tyranny. And I, for one, when I think of my dad, who went to war in World War II to fight the Nazis and the communists, and now we find that they've infiltrated our own government, even on the local level. Because people begin to think in those ways. So, I'll make it short. I believe that every citizen needs to be free under the law. Follow the law, but you have your freedom. And I think that every citizen should be allowed to speak and to tell you just how they feel. And I thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Other public comment?
I'll make it real quick since everyone, has already chimed in.
Can I grab your name and,
Mark Chassie from Auburn. So I'm in favor of some type of resolution. But it's more than that. It's really about, I think, one of the things in the state constitution is about training your electors, because they're busy doing many things. We're the public, but we research, we learn things, and it's part of our duty to educate yourselves as well. We're actually the top of the pecking order. A lot of people forget that. One of the things is the ivermectin. That's also, Mexico is in the same situation where they gave out kits and they're doing remarkably well. And isn't it interesting that, go to the CDC's website, that all of those Afghan immigrants that are coming, they're all being prescribed ivermectin. So look it up. It's on their list of things that they have. So, it's like, why this? Because it's the carrot and the stick. When you see physicians, the hospitals, it's all about money. The carrot is the money. It comes down from the top, from the federal government, right? Gets passed down, we'll give you billions of dollars. But if you don't do what we say, there's the stick. And that's how everything gets operated now. The carrot and the stick. It's all about, we'll either take this or, we'll ding you on the other side of it. And the other thing is, I called St. Mary's I did a lot of things, but I had some time on my hands. And I called St. Mary's because monoclonal antibodies are now readily available and safe. So they sent me to the infusion center, and to date, they've only given 1 dose. And that's because no one's prescribing it. Either because they don't know enough about it, or it's the same thing. They're being encouraged to not do that. Instead, and this is the CDC protocol, by the way. I'm a respiratory therapist by my past trade. What they do is the CDC said, well, you can go to the hospital, but unless you're really sick, you're supposed to be sent home. They give you some Tylenol or whatever. So you come back if you're really sick. So that's what's happening. And then what do? They put people on ventilators, and they're giving in, what's the medication that Fauci is invested in?
Remdesivir.
Right, 50% death rate, okay? And you do not put patients, I'm a respiratory therapist, you don't put them on ventilators. You do not put them on ventilators. It causes more harm and will have an 8% death, mortality rate. So why is that? Because that's the policy. It was handed down and they're following it. And they're all afraid, because of the carrot and the stick, to make any waves and do anything else, which is really sad. Anyway, that's all I had to say.
thank you, Mr. Jason. Thank you. Any other public comment?
I'm John Bazinet from Lewiston. It's my understanding that after the Holocaust in the Nuremberg trials, it went global mandate that no one would be forced to take any kind of inoculation, especially one that kills people.
Thank you, Mr. Bassett. Any other public comment? Okay, thank you very much for coming and speaking with such passion. Let me find my agenda. Okay, we're moving on to number 9, new business and the remote meeting policy. This is actually, we're gathering information on this. This is also the public hearing for the remote meeting policy. Is there anyone that had come to address the public meeting policy for the public hearing on that? Okay, thank you. So then let's open it up to commissioners to discuss this proposed policy and your thoughts on it.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So just to clarify, we are not voting on this tonight. Thank you.
Agenda?
Remote meeting policy?
Oh,
It's
the
under new
policy?
business.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the last issue. That'll be up to the, it depends on if we have a finished product and we're ready to you know, that's up to the commissioners, if they feel like they're ready to move forward with it, or if they have some.
Madam Chair? Yes. Did we have a policy before?
No, the policy before simply was under state statute, that commissioners or selectmen or councilors had to be present to vote and so on. There wasn't any remote meetings. And then the remote meeting thing came about because of the pandemic and the
Right.
emergency orders. And then they passed a statute which allows us to have remote meetings. I will tell you that the policy that was passed out came from, kind of from MCCA, that all of the counties could do the couple of changes that I made was on the section where it says that I changed the words "not practicable." In other words, you need to be members of the, under conditions and requirements, members of the public body, elected officials are expected to be physically present for public proceedings, except when being physically present. The original wording there was "not practicable." I looked at there was an attorney that looked at it for municipalities that I got a hold of. And they thought that that was really too, not very precise. And so I changed that to physically present is not possible. And then the other thing I took out where the area of the public, one of the reasons that you didn't need to be here was if the area of the public body's jurisdiction includes geographic characteristics that impede or slow travel. That may work in Aroostook or Piscataquis counties, but we didn't really need that here. So I made those two changes in the one that was presented.
So, say if we had a snowstorm and we couldn't all be physically present, would that allow us to meet remotely or no?
Good question.
Because it's not possible.
It's not possible. If the entire group, if you have a situation where the entire group has to meet remotely, then that takes care of it.
We need the technological capability to do so, which I don't know if we have at this point. We will have,
Before we're done, if you,
yeah.
Madam Chair, I don't see that it says everyone has to be unable to attend. It just says illness, physical or other physical condition or temporary absence from the jurisdiction of the body that causes a member of the body to be unable to travel. So I would just state that that would not require that the entire commission could not be able to attend remotely. That could be negated by somebody living in an apartment across the street, and being able to walk here would then seem to be by rights and requiring that all commissioners would be present.
no, that's not what it says.
Like if you live in Sabattis and a sinkhole opens up in the middle of your street and you can't physically travel, then that might.
It's not funny that happens in Sabattis.
Happens all the time, right?
Go right ahead.
Well, let's do a scenario here, okay? A big snowstorm, all right? We have a meeting, it's been announced. Public knows there would be a meeting. Would they know that the meeting would be remote?
Would make, in reality, depending on, again, if you have a snowstorm that comes in, what normally has happened in the past is that you simply change the meeting date to the next week or whatever. But, you know, if a certain circumstance that we have to meet, then we would put it out as best we can through the media and through the, you know, on the website and so on.
And that call would be made by the chair?
Madam Chair, I don't believe that's the case for the bylaws. I think it would basically be, if it was scheduled, we would have to decide whether we were here or not. There's procedures in the bylaws if not enough show up for a quorum. So.
Madam Chair, so if not enough showed up for a quorum, by default, we would recess the meeting. I don't think we have to adjust anything on this, really.
Well,
It's all kind of common sense.
If you have half of the people that can make it here and half of the people on Zoom or Skype, then you get a quorum.
Right.
Because they're allowed to do remote access.
If you adopt this.
Well, the thing is how hard are we gonna make it for people to qualify for doing remote access? Is it gonna be a convenience thing for remote access, or is it an emergency thing for remote access?
The purpose of this and the purpose, when it actually in kind of infers it in the statute, it can't be just baseball games on tonight, so I guess I'll just sit home and do it remotely. That doesn't count. There has to be an existence of an emergency, which requires a public body to meet by remote methods, or illness or other physical condition or temporary absence for the jurisdiction that causes a member to be unable to travel to and attend in person. Those are essentially the two reasons for going remote.
And that's the norm right now with governmental,
Seems to be, yeah.
okay, so.
There is, as a matter of fact, in speaking with some of our own municipalities, they are not going to do the hybrid method that this will do.
And the key word there is right now, because before the emergency that the governor issued, you had to be present in a meeting, and like when our bylaws were written, you had to be present in a meeting for a vote. We have on occasion had somebody that, called and was in listening mode, but then there were some changes, so now it's sort of left a hole, and they wanted everybody to have, the way I understand it, Mr. Poirier actually knows more about this, they want everyone to have a policy in place
Right.
going forward.
My understanding is that the state legislature realized that during the declaration of the emergency, that there was no set procedure, and this was a proactive way of approaching this going forward. Instead of having it be emergency declaration, they passed this, I'm not sure exactly what you, this Title I bill, asking municipalities and towns to adopt this policy. I think on the information that you gave us, that Isaiah requested, there's a gentleman from another county who kind of volunteered to step forward and kind of started laying this out based on the law. And then you also included in that information the letter from that lawyer giving us some additional guidance. And that's the way I understand this, is we're just being proactive. Instead of adopting a policy like this in an emergency situation, the idea is that you do it now, not while you're not necessarily level-headed, but when things aren't so stressful, and therefore you can make some good decisions and give yourself a roadmap going forward. I think there was some debate and considerations given at the state level to try to address this in the best way it can. The challenge is definitely you can't write this to take up every little quirky scenario that we can all come up with here this evening. But on the other hand, I guess I would say try, we adopt it. If it doesn't work, I believe we can go back and change it. We're not chiseling this in stone. We are putting it forward as a method, just so we all understand going forward what that method is. That's my understanding.
Madam Chair, I have drafted up a adjustment to this policy, if you'd be Thank you. I would ask the commission to consider changing this. If we are going to wait till the next meeting, I can understand that. I do think there are some other pressing matters that should be added as well to the agenda, but basically, some of the changes would just be conditions and requirements to be able to attend remotely under the first paragraph. And then in which the physical, where we speak of members of the public body, it's the second paragraph, second full paragraph. Down at the end of the sentence, it says one or more members is not possible, may include. That's using the actual language in the law that we received. And then stating that under 2, that causes a member of the body crossing out to be unable to travel. Underline the changes underlined to face significant difficulties traveling to and attending in person, using the language from the law, I believe, at that point. I just feel if we have a law already, and this document is almost verbatim using that law, which is a law actually, not a mandate. It's passed by the legislature, so that's a good sign for once. And then members of the under 3, members of the public will be provided the, instead of ability, meaningful opportunities to participate using the same language as in the document that we have, and trying to use the same language from the law. And also adding on under 3, if the public is mandated to attend remotely, the commission will also attend remotely. After all, if it's such a dangerous emergency, the commission should not be meeting in person either. And the public, if they are denied their right to peaceably assemble in person, we as commissioners should deal with the same challenges in that. I'd also suggest we would not say if public input. We can go further than the law. We can't go. Sure.
That's fine.
John Michael, I guess. This one's John Michael.
John's got one. We were sharing one.
Oh, okay, so just Sally.
Everybody have one? Thank you. So if you're looking at the one I've shared, obviously that's not required, it's up to you, but I would strike if public. Per our bylaws, we are required to allow public input. Obviously, the only exception would be under executive session lawfully entered into using the correct subsection and citing all of that and having a proper vote. But instead of if public, it would be public input will be allowed. And then at any meeting where remote participation is allowed, and the county will provide an effective means of communication. 5, last sentence, chair of the board shall not mute or kick off people without following the charter and bylaws procedures as applicable. We are still bound by our bylaws whether we're remote or not. So we just need to make sure that if someone is displaying a hand signal or writing something inappropriate on a sign, that they are warned. And after, I believe, as the bylaws require, repeated warnings, they then may be ejected from the meeting. They cannot just be muted. And that would be the same, obviously, with elected commissioners. There's a procedure in the charter for that part. And then scrolling down to 8, all documents, just the last section says all agenda items and supporting documentation and paperwork discussed will be posted on the website 5 calendar days before the meeting or earlier if the 5th day is a weekday or a holiday. And that is just to make sure that our citizens have the same ability to look at the documents that we are voting on that may be affecting them as we do. Obviously, you may have some other ideas.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Commissioner Michaels.
The 5 calendar days, does that follow any existing protocol?
No.
We reference a existing due diligence, due notice requirement Why do we have to have a specific requirement for this?
Madam Chair?
Commissioner, okay.
I'll
go
defer.
ahead.
I'll defer.
Follows the requirement to publish the agenda, I think.
Basically, I think we passed a policy in the past for that.
There should be a standard, otherwise you have to remember how to notify depending on what you're notifying, which is ridiculous. So we should have a standard for all notifications, as far as I'm concerned.
Madam Chair, I think we passed a policy in the past stating that we would at least post it by Friday at the end of business day. So I think that would be, that's counting back, and maybe I missed a day, but counting back from a Wednesday, we normally get our agenda at 3 or 4 p.m. For like this meeting, we received at 3 or 4 p.m. last Friday. And I feel that it's just as easy to send that to the towns. I think there's a setup in that policy that it would go to the towns. If anybody asks to be on a list, that we'll send it to them as well, and giving it to the Sun Journal. And I think hopefully post it on our website.
The supporting documents aren't ready on Friday. That's why you get sometimes the warrants on Monday. Our payroll is Friday. And that's, you'll see some of those documents then will come behind it on Monday.
Yeah, I know, what I'm addressing is why a specific method here, which may not correspond with the accepted method overall. I mean, there may be some, circumstances which play into it, but to me, if I'm on the city council in Lewiston, which I was for quite a while, everything was, this is the way it's going to be for all public announcements. Not, well, if it's this, it's going to be this, if it's that, it's going to be that.
That's the way it is. It doesn't matter, they go out on a Friday regardless of.
Okay, but this wording here is fine with everybody?
No, well,
That I gave you is
Okay,
essentially.
all right, well, that's what I'm questioning.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I guess when I read paragraph 8, I'm reading the first sentence that's not underlined. And it says, all documents and material considered by the public will be made available electronically or otherwise to the public who attend by remote methods to the same extent customarily available to the public. So I think we've already answered that. I think the second sentence just makes it more difficult. I mean, it does what Commissioner Plord is asking, that we're going to do it as it's customarily available. So I don't think we need to add that sentence at all. I'm not sure I understand why we're adding that. If it's the same, because if we're making it different, that really is, that's even worse, or at least having two policies on when public records are available is not ideal by any standards.
Sure.
So I think we just leave the first sentence there, delete the second one.
And may I respond?
Your initials next to that.
The goal, basically, intent with that was just to make sure that everybody, that the public has the same access to documents other than those that are actually by FOA confidential, not by people's opinions, but FOA law, as stated in, I think, 406. Other than that would all be available to people, to the general public. So the purpose is just to make sure, because I think I've asked for a copy of that policy before, and Mr. Post, if you would please give us a copy of that policy on the setup to make sure that it is, the agenda and supporting documentation is available on Friday. If you could give a copy to the commission, I'd appreciate that.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
Number 3 on the original sheet, members of the public will be provided with the ability to participate by remote methods, et cetera. Sounds like that the public, I'm kind of asking this as the minister, it sounds like we're setting this up to the public will be able to participate at any meeting remotely? Is that what number 3 says?
Yes.
Okay, so number 4, I think should be merged in with number 3. Per Commissioner Larry's point, and just say, public is allowed at any, well, or maybe that covers it. I don't think, is number 4 amendment even needed?
No.
think number 4 is excessive. We've already stated the public has a right to participate in number 3. Well, I don't know if number 4 is needed at all, let alone the amended version of it. And then I guess number 4 says if public is allowed, but we already allowed the public on number 3, didn't we? So maybe that number 4 should just be stricken.
Well, there can be moments when, you know, the public's not allowed. For example, under the, there are some things that's
Executive session.
as well, there says at the discretion of the
Yeah.
chair and so on. So, but those are all taken care of in the bylaws.
Madam Chair,
The public is protected by number 3, and number 4, I don't think does any harm in that case.
just to clarify though,
Just 1 second, I want.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear, I'm sorry. I didn't, I know I did not.
When he's done.
I did not.
Go ahead, Commissioner Larry.
Which I did not know, Commissioner
Go
Mike.
ahead, Commissioner Larry, go ahead.
Okay. Just to clarify, though, it is not, with all due respect, it is not up to the chair on what is lawfully executive session material or not. 406 is very clear, so that must be followed. It is not up to the chair to decide whether it goes into executive session or not. It takes a vote of the board, and it's severely limited to specific sections of 405-6. So we have to make sure we're doing that properly. Thank you.
That is not what I was referring to. I was
Okay.
referring to during a subject that the chair may determine that the people can speak, or they may determine that they don't have the authority to. That's what I'm referring to.
I respectfully disagree. We are required by our bylaws to allow the public to speak to any agenda item or non-agenda item, so I want to make sure that we clarify that statement very clearly. Thank you.
Number 3, I guess I would like some input from the board on if the public is mandated to attend remotely, the commission will also attend remotely. What your feeling on that, please?
Number 3?
Yes. The last line that was added there, so that if I assume this, well, no, you know what, I'm not going to assume anything, just take it at its face value and comments.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Commissioner Poirier, I don't think we need to put a condition on the commissioners regarding how we attend. I don't see a need for it, that's all.
I think it should be based upon the situation. It shouldn't be, you know, an across-the-board mandate that if, you know, 'cause that's not.
I agree. I think the commission should not impose undue mandates or requirements on itself.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I kind of agree with that.
Commissioner
And then
Michaels?
What commissioner doesn't want to attend in person? And would
That's a
prefer to
preferred
attend in-
way, of course.
And who would want to attend? So I don't think it'll be abused, the idea of being able to attend remotely. Otherwise, why be on the board?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Larry?
Unless Commissioner Ames wishes to speak, obviously, I don't want to. Okay.
Larry?
Thanks. I understand that, but here's the point. The whole remote thing is a pain in the rear, no matter how you slice it. And what my point is this: if we're unwilling to fight mandates that are unconstitutional and keeping people from peaceably assembling before a smaller legislative body, then we should put ourselves in the same shoes as our constituents and attend remotely as well.
Madam Chair, I disagree. I think the commission can decide for itself how it wants to conduct its meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I just discovered that in Section 18, taking up items on the agenda, number F, it talks about the item shall be announced by the chair and so on in action. And then it says the item shall be open for germane public input at the discretion of the chair.
Madam Chair, that only states that the chair may decide if someone wants to talk about the price of rice in wherever. That's not germane. If someone wants to speak to an agenda item or non-agenda item, that's not non-germane. It's very obvious when something is germane. That language has been used and abused to keep the public from having the opportunity to speak in the past, and it must not be allowed to happen again. The public has the right to speak to the commission regarding agenda or non-agenda items. The bylaws require it, and if we would like to start violating our bylaws, that's very dangerous. That's why we have people showing up frustrated here, because we have
Okay.
school boards and others doing the same thing.
They've spoken for themselves, and they were very clear and very passionate. I don't think we need to speak for them.
Defense of them, just as any other commissioner has a responsibility to, Madam Chair. Thank you.
I don't think they need to be defended. Madam Chair,
Yes,
I
go
move we
ahead.
accept the policy as presented to the board.
And to be clear on your motion, we have two competing policies, or we have the original policy and we have a revised policy.
The original.
Okay, let me write that in the notes. Commissioner Ames, that is a second from you. And and I just want to be very clear, you're talking about the original policy?
Yes.
Madam Chair, if I can make an amendment?
Certainly.
I do agree that probably the wording in 4, the change there was appropriate. And that would be the only change I think would be.
So will be, if public,
Yeah, public input will be allowed, as always, but you can control the time limit that people can speak as chair. You can limit discussion. And of course, we can vote ourselves to move on, but I think that's appropriate, because if public input is allowed is a little nebulous, so I wouldn't,
be allowed. Okay, good.
Madam Chair, so Commissioner Plord's request to amend the Commissioner Larry's number 4, substitute that for the
Right,
original number.
to, if public input, just so I think we take the if out there, capital P, public input will be allowed at any meeting where remote participation is allowed. Gentleman that made the motion and second, do you,
Yeah, I'm
do
fine
you,
with that.
do you
That's fine.
accept that? Okay. Call for discussion on this. All those in favor of the motion of accepting the original remote policy that was in your packet with the change on number 4, public input will be.
I think for point of order,
Yes, sir.
I think we need to vote on the amendment first, unless it's a friendly amendment and you want to include that in the original.
Considered friendly.
Yeah, they both agreed that they
Okay.
would accept that in.
Okay.
However, I'm not if you feel like I need to back it up, I will. I'd be happy to.
No, we're just
Okay.
trying to follow Robert's rules, too.
Thank you. I appreciate you doing that. I get lost in them sometimes. Okay, so let's take a vote. All those in favor of,
Opposed?
and that is 6-0. Okay, approve the fund accounting software.
So a few weeks back, you, as a commission, approved fund accounting to be purchased with the ARPA funds.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Just wondering, did we ever give the public the opportunity to speak to this policy as per the bylaws?
Yeah, yes, that was it's the public hearing, and so that was the first thing I did, is ask for the public.
Can I? So like I said, I'm new to all these meetings and stuff, and I don't understand how you expect the public to be able to comment about something that you guys talk about after we hear it. Maybe, am I misunderstanding it? I feel like you guys just had a conversation about some of the bylaws for a Zoom meeting that removed the school boards to Zoom meetings, which has helped up my life a lot. I'm able to be a lot more a part of it. And it sounds to me, sitting here tonight, that you guys are potentially offering a Zoom meeting as, for the public to possibly talk about something. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know if I was interrupting.
Go ahead.
So
I'm assuming there's no, of course, of course.
No, go ahead.
Come on up. I'm confused as to when we're supposed to give you our input, I guess. And I don't want to interrupt, I want you guys to try to do what you need to do efficiently as possible. But I just heard a few things go back and forth being bounced across the room. And after doing a few Zoom meetings for the school board, I think I want to say a couple things
Go for
about
it.
what
You're
we're
on.
talking about. So I'm not sure when I get to speak. I don't want to take too much of your time. I know we all got to get home, but as far as the Zoom meetings, it's a great way to get a lot more people involved in what's going on, which I think is critical nowadays. I'm not exactly sure what you guys have in your hands, what you're officially voting on. I don't know how easily it can be amended. I've heard some talk about if people can't make it. I've heard some talk about where if we're forcing the public to do Zoom, the commissioners all need to show up still, or something like that. But I guess in my world, that doesn't make sense. If one of the commissioners can't work and he was voted in by my vote, I want him to be a part of the meeting. I don't know if I'm misunderstanding. So he is allowed to,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
anyone, he,
Yeah.
she, whoever's allowed to do meeting
Yeah.
through Zoom. And is there certain, like, requirements? I know the baseball game can't be on, you can't stand on, because I get that, trust me, I'm all for that. But on the same hand, if Sebas does have a sinkhole, and that commissioner can't show up, you're saying that,
Qualify, yeah. If he can't get to us, then he could join in by Zoom. But you have to have a reason, really. In other words, we are elected to be here, to make decisions. So when people, the general public knows we should be here, generally, all right?
I don't want to interrupt, but I don't have anything to write down. When you say you're elected to be here, I find that as, we're using words too vaguely nowadays. And when you say you're elected to be here, I don't feel that that's necessary. You're elected to voice the people's
Well,
concerns
of-
and opinions.
in
I don't- I
in
don't
addition
want
to
do it.
that,
You don't have to be here to do it.
Well, according to law, you do.
Okay,
know,
that's what I'm asking.
Until, before COVID, everybody, you couldn't vote.
Crazy world we live in.
Yeah, you couldn't vote on something if people were doing it on the phone somewhere else. The law says if you have a government body, they have to be present to vote.
Okay,
And if you don't have a quorum, you can discuss it among the people that are here. But then you have to convene everybody together to make a final vote.
okay, so these are all the things that I'm not educated on, I don't follow as
Yeah.
much. I'm just hearing that if I have an elected official that can't make it, he's not necessarily out there speaking for me. He or she's not out there speaking for me in my points of views, and I don't think that's right. So, you use the word qualify. If that person qualifies not to be here and do a Zoom meeting, but yet you just said no one in the public can be there because something's too dangerous, whether it's a snowstorm or a pandemic. So, I guess I'm concerned as to who's deciding what's qualifying or not.
It's more like you have to have a legitimate reason not to be present.
Legitimate.
You can't just say, oh, I don't feel like going to the meeting tonight, I'm gonna Zoom.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Well, again, we would be qualifying to legitimate, who decides what legitimate? I'm not trying to be a pain, I'm just trying to understand what's going on.
If you have a family emergency, if you have, whatever. But if it's
So
just a
if your
matter of
car
not
broke
wanting to
down,
go,
Your car broke down.
yeah,
you can
that's-
say, I can't be there tonight, I wanna do it by Zoom, and they can
Guys
still
one and two?
communicate, and they can still vote or do whatever.
absolutely.
Okay, I guess that's my concern, when we use the words qualify, legitimate, I'm really getting tired of the word emergency. Those are things that are discrepancies. So that's what I'm trying to understand tonight. And like I said, I don't wanna take up too many people's time, I know this gentleman had a question, I just don't know when we're supposed to speak without being.
There's like
commissioners that want to interact with you. Commissioner Michaels, then Commissioner Ames. Go ahead.
So what we did, we passed some provisions clarifying the requirements for the board members to be here and outlining some reasons why they wouldn't have to and could participate remote instead. And by the way, it doesn't really mean anything, because if any of us say, I'm sick, that's one of the reasons, so how can you prove it anyway? So we really did, we put up an honor system saying you should always be here unless you have a good reason. Then we said the public always gets to participate here or by remote. That's all we just did.
That's awesome. I would love to be part of the remotes when I can fit it in my life. I have kids, I coach kids, we coach in the afternoons. So
And just a $20 charge.
I'll pay $20, no problem. If it allows me to hear what's going on and understand and be part
My
of it.
constituents.
Commissioner Ames.
I look at it as we're all adults. If you call and say, hey, I can't come tonight, I'm gonna be on Zoom, I'm not gonna question anything. I don't need some explanation.
And I appreciate it, and that's what I would hope, but nowadays, it doesn't feel like that's what's going on in our government, and that's what I'm concerned about, and that's what I wanna voice my opinion about. We're using terms like emergency, we're redefining the word vaccine. I don't understand what's going on. I'm trying to, I guess, grasp what's going on so my kids have the same opportunities I had growing up. So I appreciate your time, thank you.
Sure. I would answer your question, though. While it's said that it won't be used in different ways, watch in the future it will. I've seen that very often, so thank you. And
I'm hoping I'll be able to watch through the Zoom meetings, and I'm hoping that what I'm hearing now is not misinterpreted. So I think I heard that you don't have the technology yet, though. Is that what I heard? You guys can't even do Zoom?
Well,
working on it.
We have it.
It's been
We
a
have it.
challenge.
They're rough, but we can.
We're working on
Maybe
it.
Dave's done a lot better.
That's right, Dave
got-
is working on
We got
it.
this guy Dave who's sending him to junior high school, so I hope it works out all right.
Well, then send an RSU 4 after, because we have a hard time hearing what the board members are talking about. I spoke up at the last meeting, and apparently, after my wife watched it, after we were done, I was asked twice to stop talking, because my time was up. And I couldn't hear him. I couldn't hear anything else anyone was saying. So I think technology is gonna help us communicate. Hopefully it's accurately, and hopefully we can make the rules match the day and age that we are. Thank you for your time.
Very good.
Thank you.
Someone else had something they wanted to add to this? Sure, go ahead.
That's why I was raising my hand, was because I thought that we would have a chance to provide some input before you voted on whatever it was, this remote, policy meeting, that's all. And so I heard a couple things, and then you voted, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, I guess I wanted to be able to say
Is
something.
it Mark? Yeah. We could vote to reconsider, so it's not like it's all locked in. We're at the same meeting, so that's why we're letting you speak.
So I thought I heard something, but my hearing isn't as good as it used to be, is that are you saying that you, either the chair or the committee, decide whether or not something is open to the public? I mean, outside of, what is it, someone said executive session, but other than that, is that?
Section
is that
405.
something that should be, it's supposed to be open, or is that?
Meetings are public, yes. Meetings are public.
Okay, so anything that comes up,
There's some
we should
sections aren't
be able to be part of that in one way or another.
And, yeah, and what you're asking, good. Okay. What you're asking about is, Section 34 says any person wishing to address the Board of Commissioners will be given an opportunity to do so in accordance with Section 7 and the following procedures. So that is, don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't speak to an agenda item other than executive session items, which just out of respect for certain lawful, an employee is getting fired or something like that, those, unless they request to be open, those are kept out of the public eye.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner.
That's generally true, although there are some things that are just for the commissioners. For instance, we have comments from the public, so you can talk about anything in the world, and we let people talk about anything in the world. And then down below, you notice Section 10, if you have a copy of today's agenda, discussion items for commissioners only. Then number 11, future agenda items for commissioners only. For instance, you won't open that up to the remote for the public because it's traditionally just an inside conversation about future things we're going to do. However, if there's anything that you want to talk about, you can do so at the comments from the public. We need more monkeys and.
Of order, though,
Agenda or not
that's,
agenda.
that's,
Yeah, it does not have to be on the agenda. If you've got something on your mind and you want to use the opportunity to voice it, you're always welcome to do that.
I beg to, go ahead, sorry. I beg to state, though, for the commission, this agenda, commissioners only on future agenda items, I don't believe I see that anywhere in the bylaws where it says that the attendees may not discuss, that any citizen may not discuss. So I would respectfully say that is, we must not prohibit the the public from speaking to agenda items. This is a construct that's been here for a while. Discussion items, commissioners only, it's only when we're having a deliberation that people are not supposed to be speaking, i.e. we're debating something on the floor. So both of those, and I've seen discussion items used as a non-new business item, but used back on February 17th to keep the public from speaking, and I had to fight to give the public the opportunity to even speak. So that is not, with all due respect, just as a commissioner, I won't speak to any commissioner, but that is not accurate. We must allow the public to speak to any agenda item and also non-agenda item per the bylaws. So just because somebody put this in parentheses that says commissioners only discussion items or future agenda items, commissioners only, is inaccurate. People can put whatever they want, but the bylaws and the Constitution rule that.
Let's have that discussion another day unless there's
One last
something you
thing.
want to say.
Number 10 and 11 are items that we do not make any motions on because they're just discussion items, just for the commissioners. All boards, all deliberative bodies have sections where the public participates and where just the council or the commission or the legislature participates. And the public can say, as we mentioned for the third time here, anything they want under the comments from the public, whether it's on the agenda or not. So they're well covered and they're well protected.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Go right ahead.
I just wanted to say that if it seems like we're a little skittish, we are, because what did you hear what the DOJ just came down with yesterday? Anybody? Yeah. You know what I'm talking about? They're literally gonna become, wanna come down and manage meetings, like school board meetings and such, because they feel threatened. Anyways, my point is, they're coming back the other way, okay? And so people wanna make sure that they're not cut out of this process. And it's interesting, because I was reading this today, power inherent in the people, all power is inherent in the people. All free governments are founded in their authority and instituted for their benefit. They have therefore an unalienable and indefensible right to institute government, to alter, reform, or totally change the same when their safety and happiness require it. Just, again, they have the pecking order. Just want to make sure that that's not going to happen, what we're seeing, that they seem to want to do around the country today. So if we're skittish, it's because we're in skittish times. Okay.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you. First, I don't see anywhere in the agenda here where it says public comment. Sorry, I was a little late, just got out of work, so I was able to make it here on time. And got lost. This building's a maze.
The building is a maze, indeed, yes.
So, is this the same agenda you guys have? I don't see anywhere where it says.
It's there. It's
Number
just
8.
closer to the top. It's after.
It just says Town of Leeds, so it might have made it confusing for you.
Roman numerals, Roman numeral 8.
It just says Town of Leeds, though, so that might have confused you.
Could you give me your name and your town?
I'm from here in Auburn. My name is Noah Sherwood.
Noah Sherwood?
Yeah, my name is Noah Sherwood. I grew up in Auburn here. Yeah, I live here.
Noah, just 1 second. Does anyone, and I'm pretty sure they won't, anyone have any objection to taking Noah out of order and letting him speak?
No.
Okay, go right ahead.
No.
Thank you.
So you just, Mr. Larry, you just said, section 7 says we can talk about any items, right?
Anything that's lawful for public discussion. Obviously, if you're saying something, scandalous or scurrilous about somebody, I can't give you all the details, but you can insult commissioners. Obviously, I'm not the chair, is the one in charge with restrictions, but the bylaws were ignored. We didn't even do a motion before we started debating, so thank you.
Gotcha. All right, so I have a question specifically for you. I've heard that you had a resolution that you were trying to get on the docket today, that I'm told you got everything passed in on time for the deadline.
Yes, sir.
And it was still not put on the docket, is that true?
Yes, sir.
All right, could you tell me what that was?
That was a resolution against basically condemning Governor Mills' mandates and injection mandates, and also President Biden's injection mandates, and the removal of the religious exemption for healthcare workers. So that's the resolution. It does not have to be added to the agenda for the meeting, current meeting, but it does, per the bylaws, need to be added as long as it is not something scandalous, obviously, but it's required.
No, actually, you could address your questions to me. That was my decision, and as you can see, we've got a bunch of other presentations. We had a very, very full agenda. I mean, weeks ago, some of these things were in line to be on the agenda. That was my decision, and ultimately, it's the decision of the commissioners have a right to have a vote and override any decision I make, and I always open that up for them to do that.
All right, thank you for that. So I understand, so just you just had a long list of stuff to do, that makes sense. Will you commit to getting that on the agenda for the next meeting? Can we count on that?
No, I don't. I would not be committing to that right now, because the same day that he suggested that, I heard from more than a majority of commissioners that they did not want that on the agenda, and we run as, I certainly, take in and run as a board. And so.
Point of order,
that's why-
Madam Chair.
but No, I didn't call on you. But
The point of order is in order.
No, I would.
You cannot conduct business outside of public eyes, and that was conducted outside of public eyes. Calling other commissioners and not calling me was not appropriate,
Okay, I'm
or
gonna
reaching
ask
out
you
to them.
stop.
I did
not
nothing
call-
inappropriate.
No, I'm going to ask you to stop. I did not call a
Appropriate.
commissioner. I said that it was communicated, and commissioners can individually communicate to me. I did get a
Madam
lot
Chair?
of communication
Madam
about
Chair?
it. However, I'd like to offer for you to give your public comment. This isn't, it's not the time really to debate that, but I want you to have your opportunity to give whatever comments you would like to make, and we'd like to hear them.
Okay, I'll try to make it brief.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, well, we are at a challenging period in our history, in our country, of course, right now. I want to make sure to remind everybody that just because there's a scary virus doesn't mean our rights go away, doesn't mean the president can mandate control over what companies do. That's not, his executive order is definitely overreach. It's not his job, that's the legislature's job to regulate the economy in that way. And then what happened to the 10th Amendment, that's also the state's rights to take care of that. So I urge you all, I grew up here my whole life, I'm an Auburn boy. I urge you all, please, to stand with us for medical freedom and informed consent. If we allow them to mandate a vaccine into our bloodstream just because the government says so, what else are they allowed to mandate? Where is that line in the sand between our bodily autonomy, our right to decide what goes on with our body, and the state's right? Does the state have the ultimate right to put whatever it wants into our bodies, whether there's a reason or not, whether it's deemed a good enough reason or not? So I'm here to ask you, I know it's not the agenda item, I ask you folks to please stand with us for our sovereignty, our right to medical freedom, and right to bodily autonomy, and informed consent. If we don't know what they're putting in us, it's not a fair deal.
Thank you.
That's all.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it very much. Let me ask you this. Can we move Yes, go ahead.
I appreciate you all taking your time to be here tonight, and like I said, I'm new to this, but one thing I wanted to mention is what you just said is one thing that's concerning me as a parent with the school board, where it ties into a few things we've said so far. As far as the confidential meeting between the commissioners only, I understand you guys definitely should have your time to talk, but I feel like the school board gets together, talks, and decides before they ever hear the people. And that's my experience with the school board. I don't have experience with the commissioners yet, but it almost is like you just said it, where enough commissioners told you they didn't want it on the agenda, so you didn't put it on the agenda. And I'm sorry if I'm misunderstanding, But that's what I thought I just heard, and it seems to be the same thing that's going on with the school boards, where we, the people, are finding about it too late, kind of like putting, hey, does anyone want to talk about this before we talk about it on the list? Well, we didn't hear a chance to hear what you had to say. So again, I just feel like things are out of place, and I'm sure you guys have reasons for doing what you're doing, but when people are asking for something to be on the agenda, it's because it's important to the people.
But let me assure you, we did not have a we did not have a meeting
No,
and decide
I
that.
understand.
And
No,
I'm
I
sorry
did say
if I
you said
misspoke. Yeah.
certain commissioners came to you and said they didn't want it on the agenda. That's what you said, if I'm not mistaken.
We have a lot of county things that we decide on that are on our plate right now, and the timing was, for me, the timing was all off because we have so many things. We're in the middle of budget season. We have so many things that are actually our decisions that have to move forward with. But I understand what you're saying.
I respect that, thank you.
Commissioner Michael?
But it does need to be understood, Madam
Commissioner
Chair.
Michael? Commissioner
Okay.
Michael?
Sure, thank you.
And there is a new provision in the bylaws which says that any commissioner may put something on the agenda with a vote of 4 or more commissioners. So there's a method to put things on the agenda. And it is always appropriate for people to pick up the phone and lobby other commissioners on, get their ideas on things, or lobby them for votes on things, or suggest as to why they should do something. And Commissioner Larry has called me several times and done that, thank you, as has everybody. So let's not get too self-righteous about it. That's all. And we don't.
Objection, that's out of order, sir.
Okay.
You're absolutely right.
Objection.
I apologize.
Thank you.
Please
Thank you.
apologize.
Okay.
You're absolutely right. I had no right to say whatever it was I said.
Thank you.
So again, this is supposed to be to help the people, and you guys are supposed to let us know how this all works, when we can share our point or whatnot. And I also need to hear both sides of what we're supposed to be allowed to do by law. So I appreciate you, Mr. Larry, Commissioner Larry, telling us your understanding, interpretation of what's going on. And I appreciate anyone else that can offer this. This is why I showed up tonight, to understand more about how I can get my voice heard, how we can get our voice heard. And some of the things I'm hearing just seems a little bit wrong. I think if there's something that we all want on the agenda, whether it takes 4 of you or not, I mean, how many people do we need to have show up to get something on the agenda so that we can hear more about it and then have an educated decision on it? So again, thank you, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And I hope you consider what I have to say, because I know that's a problem in our schools.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
I'm going to ask the board if we can take
Madam
a
Chair.
couple things out of order. We've had people.
Point of order,
waiting
Madam
for a long
Chair. Yes, but the constituents have the top priority, not staff, not contractors. They are constituents I serve, they're constituents we serve.
Get a chance to talk.
And
It's-
Madam Chair, to state that if 4 or more commissioners state that we don't want it on the agenda means that it doesn't get added, that is inaccurate. Any agenda item shall also be placed on the next meeting's agenda upon a vote of 4 or more members. That's being used backwards. Second of all, we're not allowed to lobby outside and count and do that and make a decision based on that. I was never contacted. And furthermore, the chair may not unduly or unreasonably delay placing items on the agenda requested by other commissioners. It doesn't matter if 6 commissioners say we don't want it on the agenda. If you guys don't like it, then vote it down and go on record. But there's an issue here where nobody wants, it doesn't take very long to vote it down. Half the time, if you don't like something, you don't make a motion or a second, or I make a motion, it dies without a second, that's fair. Except for the fact that I can't discuss it, but we discussed plenty on this policy before we even had a motion or a second on the table. And then after the motion or second, after the discussion, we should have allowed germane public comment. That was not offered following the bylaws. And the question is, how do you do this? You look at the bylaws, you look at the charter of whatever school or commission, and you will find what I'm stating is pretty doggone accurate. And it's wrong how we treat the public. And this idea that the chair may keep people from speaking that has been pushed by others is inappropriate and dangerous and wrong. Thank you.
Okay. If you don't mind,
Appropriate.
if the board doesn't mind, I would like to switch B and C around. We've had somebody waiting here a long time for a presentation. And is there any objection to that? Is that, okay.
To do that, or?
So moved.
Consensus.
Yeah, that's what I'm just asking. Is there, okay. All right, so
Or
let's
vote.
go. I'd like to ask let's start the presentation for the HVAC system. I think this is going to be lengthy, and thank you for hanging in there with us.
No, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, very much so. And I don't have a real formal or lengthy presentation prepared, but I would like to talk a little bit about what our, I guess, proposal to do for you folks entailed. It's kind of evolved over the last 3 years, as I'm sure a lot of you folks have seen. It started out with a project back in 2019, pre-pandemic, where we were just looking at a heating system upgrade. And that was basically triggered by the fact that you have a pretty antiquated central steam plant here that's not very efficient, that you can't get parts for, and it's dying a slow death. Pardon my language. So initially, the project was to come in and take a look at how that heating system that's central to the facility with failing underground pipes and utilities around it could be replaced with a more modern and more efficient system. So, as I mentioned, that system is steam right now, which steam is going away. Steam is not an efficient way to heat buildings, and it's not an easily controlled system to heat buildings with. It's difficult to control heat with steam. Once the steam gets into the building, a lot of this building, as well as the jail, is already converted to hot water. And that conversion is done with what I call a heat exchanger. The steam goes in one side of it and the hot water comes out the other. So again, you're losing some efficiency there as well. So what that original project proposed to do was to replace or to decommission this central steam boiler plant and replace these heat exchangers with more modern, high-efficiency condensing style gas-fired boilers that just generate hot water without all the conversions and all the phase changes and everything that makes it inefficient. So it would have gone from a 60% efficient central steam boiler plant that's hard to control heat with to a 97% efficient series of individual condensing boiler plants. That would eliminate your underground piping and your long runs of distribution piping that go from this central plant out to the different arteries of the campus. After the pandemic hit, it became obvious that maybe we should be looking at a little bit more in these buildings, and you're not the first facility to be faced with this. Like many facilities, and it became obvious when we were even looking at the boiler plant project that you have a lot of spaces in this campus that don't meet modern ventilation requirements, that don't meet modern efficiency requirements for systems, even when you're not in the presence of a pandemic. And when you combine that with the presence of a pandemic and the indoor air quality, potential indoor air quality, issues that go along with that, obviously a poor ventilation system or a non-existent ventilation system becomes even more of an issue. So what we looked at with David last summer, at the beginning of last summer, we again toured the facility and got a better feel for what there is for ventilation in place, what there are for controls in place, and how that stands up to not only modern requirements and recommendations for healthy buildings, but how it stands up against a potential pandemic. And, I mean, it's gonna come as no surprise to you folks. I mean, we're standing in a room that has very little ventilation. You don't feel a lot of air movement here. I see one diffuser in the ceiling for a big room like this. You know, you've got a couple radiators on the wall that heat it, but there's really no system of ventilation. There's a heat pump that cools it now, and that's a great step in the right direction. So what we look to do is from 30,000 feet, we haven't rolled up our sleeves and gotten down into the weeds, but from 30,000 feet, we've taken a look at what we feel would be required here to not only bring it up to modern standards, but to take it a step further and follow ASHRAE recommendations for building in some additional measures to better enable you to face a pandemic or a potential pandemic. Some of those enhancements over and above current code requirements, and these enhancements are all recommendations that ASHRAE makes. ASHRAE is the American Society for Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning, which as a mechanical engineer is my Bible. And I'm sorry, I should have introduced myself. I'm Tony Davis with Allied Engineering, and I'm a mechanical engineer there. So what ASHRAE recommends is, they publish these white papers based on their research of the pandemic and what you can do to try to get out in front of this and prevent the spread of any airborne virus or contaminant, whether it's COVID-19 or whatever it is. So their recommendations are dilution. So if you shower the spaces with outdoor air that's healthy air, then through dilution, you're going to reduce the potential for inhalation or exposure to a virus. So one of their base recommendations is where you have a ventilation system in place, increase that by 50% over and above what even current code recommendations are. The second thing they recommend in their white papers is increasing the filtration efficiency for the air handling equipment. So a normal air handler that serves a facility, whether it be a school building or even an exam room in a hospital, would have a MERV 8 filter. That's about 30% efficient. That is 30% effective at taking dust particles and things of that nature out of the air. They recommend stepping that up to what's called a MERV 13 at minimum, and even better, go to a MERV 14. That gets you to an 85 or 95% effectiveness for taking things out of the air. The problem with that is most places that have air handlers, like your jail, they're already moving air, but to put in a bigger filter with a higher efficiency means it takes more energy to suck the air through. And the motors in these older systems just don't have that kind of a capacity. So part of what we looked at with the ventilation study with David last summer was to come in here and not only put ventilation systems in place where they don't exist now, but to build in some extra capacity. And when I say that, I'm mostly talking about the courthouse right now. For example, 2 out of your 3 courtrooms don't really have a lot for ventilation. Most of the administrative areas use hot water for heating that's converted from steam, and they use a window-mounted air conditioner for cooling, but there's really no central system of ventilation to keep that air turned over and fresh. All these window shakers do, or window air conditioning units, is circulate the air within the space. They don't bring in new air to replace old air with. So most of this building, getting that up to modern standards and then enhancing those modern standards to try to get in front of COVID or any other potential pandemic, it means putting in central air handling systems. And to keep those systems efficient, what we're envisioning here, and I'm gonna throw out the term DOAS, which you may or may not hear in talks, dedicated outdoor air system, where you just move enough air through the building to bring in the ventilation requirements dictated by ASHRAE and by COVID prevention standards, but you don't bring in as much as you might need to heat and cool. Like with the old schools, they put these huge air handlers up on the roof that look like school buses, and they'd move all kinds of air because you need that much air to cool it. With a DOAS, or dedicated outdoor air system, you're keeping your ducts smaller. You're still bringing in fresh outside air, but it's 100% outside air in a smaller quantity just to keep the spaces healthy. And then all your heating and cooling load is done with terminal units, like that heat pump you've got on the wall right there. And you already have a start on some of that here now. I know David has got heat pumps in a few areas already. And that's, again, that heat pump will heat at around 350 to 400% efficient when it's 30 or 40 degrees out, and they never really drop below 100% efficient. Electricity costs a little more, but when you're talking about a unit that'll give you an annual average efficiency for heating of 150 or 200%, it's a pretty good way to go. So for this building, basically what we proposed is to look at these DOAS, dedicated outdoor air systems, to get the occupied spaces up to modern standards and even go go over and above that to try to get out in front of this pandemic. Obviously, these central air handlers would incorporate MERV 13 or MERV 14 filters. And there's other technologies out there that ASHRAE mention in their white papers for things like heat pumps, where you don't have the ability to put big filters in them. I mean, obviously, when you look at that thing on the wall, it's pretty obviously you're not gonna put a 4-inch thick filter in that to give you 95% efficiency. So what ASHRAE, I won't say they're endorsing it yet, but what they're looking at testing on are alternate technologies such as, and again, it's a buzzword you may have heard of already, bipolar ionization is one, ultraviolet light treatment is another. What that is, like with bipolar ionization, it's basically 2 electrodes that go in the airstream. They set an electrical charge up in that airstream, and that charge essentially deems the virus ineffective at infecting people. At least that's what the testing shows, and I don't even pretend to play a chemist or a physician on television, but that's what the research shows, and that's what the vendors are telling me. With UV ultraviolet light, again, you're probably all familiar with the black lights, it's the purple light, that is very effective in killing viruses, but with that technology, it takes a longer exposure. So UV works well if you put it like in a plenum to shine it on filters, or you put it in the middle of a room where it could just stay there and kind of radiate this light and kill viruses overnight or whatever. It's not as effective in a unit like that where the air is moving very fast through the unit and it doesn't have a lot of contact time with the airstream, so it doesn't have a high kill rate. So anyway, that's a lot to absorb, and I know it is, and I'm trying not to get too deep in the weeds and make sure nobody's nodding off on me, because as an engineer, that does happen, believe me. So for this building, that's kind of what we looked at in our proposal, is get it up to modern standards for ventilation and exceed those modern standards to get out in front of any kind of pandemic. And to give you mechanical equipment that's, a lot more efficient than what you have now, and a lot more dependable. For the jail, that obviously as a jail has pretty high ventilation rates now. The cells, we're mandated and have been for years and years and years to provide pretty good ventilation rates in cells, because we all know it's a living area. People actually live there, so. Unfortunately, that equipment is starting to become antiquated. You've got heat recovery units over there, or energy recovery units, because there is a lot of outside air already coming into that jail, so we don't really need to increase it. We have a lot already just from the nature of what the facility is. But the energy recovery unit that's over there is old and it's antiquated, and it uses a wheel that transfers energy from one airstream to the other. So instead of just dumping heat or cold air out of the building, you transfer that heat or cold air into the incoming fresh air. Well, those wheels, the seals around them start to fail, and you can get what's called bypass air. So you start to get some recirculated air through those units. So now instead of 100% outside air, it's more like 90% outside air. They break down over time like everything else. So for the jail, one of the big things we proposed as part of this ventilation upgrade project was to replace those energy recovery units with units that are not only more effective at recovering energy, but more effective at preventing recirculation of air. In other words, what we think is 100% outside air, fresh air ventilation is actually 100%. The other thing we're doing over there is we're setting up several of the cell pods as isolatable cells. So in other words, we're increasing the exhaust rate in the cells so that we can create a negative pressure in those cells. And if we had an infected inmate or several, we'd have a place that we could house those inmates without endangering the rest of the facility. All the air would go into those spaces instead of anything leaking back out. So that's basically the big improvements we were proposing for the jail. And then finally, at EMA, we were looking at replacing, again, a couple of air handlers that are just old and antiquated and not meeting current code requirements for ventilation, let alone having the capability to put bigger filters in them or to bring more outside air in through them. So that's it in a nutshell, and hopefully this is what you were hoping for from me tonight. And certainly, least help answer for you when they clear it for you, yeah.
Go right ahead, Mr. Poirier.
The question I have is the EMA repairs. My understanding is that the agreement that we have with the city of Lewiston is they have a 30-day right of notice to move us out. And I have to admit, I represent Lewiston. I'd love to have you fix the fire station over in Lewiston. But I also represent the entire county, not just the city of Lewiston. And I have to honestly ask, how much of this project are we talking about? Because to invest in a property that you can be given a 30-day notice, I just need to know some real numbers on this. So out of this quote of, 6 million, I guess? Not including your fee. But going back, how much is that EMA? So I don't have that number in front of me. I know it's two fairly small air handlers, compared to. Right, and I. A lot of energy recovery units in a pretty big facility here. It's certainly a number I can come up with for David if you want to see that breakdown. Again, we haven't rolled up our sleeves and delved in. When we did the boiler plant assessment, that, at least we thought was a project, and we actually did a conceptual design on that project where we hired an independent cost estimator. And we put together a basis of design narrative with sketches that basically said exactly what we were proposing. And we sent it out to an independent cost estimator and got actual construction cost estimate. We haven't gotten that far down the path on this one yet. But it's certainly something I can take a look at square footages and equipment sizes and at least get an order of magnitude breakdown for what that facility would be.
And I have those sketches. I didn't remember the Lewiston Fire Department being a part of that. Did I just overlook that, or has it always been a part?
Sketches were for the boiler plant project back in 2019.
Yeah, the EMA is sort of a new addition to this. And I might have missed it, but I didn't ever remember when the EMA building became part of this project.
No, that just happened.
When the commissioners asked me to work up numbers to take care of the employees for all the cooling and fresh air, that is a department that we manage, and that is employees that, again, we represent, so I did include that. Granted, we've been there for 30 years, I don't think we're gonna move anywhere in the next 4 or 5. So,
But it's a legitimate concern. Okay, somebody had their hand up over here. Yes, sir.
Can some of this be phased in, or is it necessary to do it all at once?
There's absolutely ways to phase it. We've done it in these courthouses and jails before, and you almost always phase it, and just not have to move everybody out to do the work, but yeah. Every phase you add to it, adds to the project budget, but yeah, absolutely, there's ways we can fix it. I mean, for instance, you can do the heating system, which is kind of a prerequisite to this ventilation upgrade, but you could do that first and, do the courtroom second and the rest of the courthouse third and the jails fourth, or however we want to break it up. I mean, to the extent you can keep a contractor from having to demobilize and remobilize, that's where your cost comes in. But, to be able to say, do this before you do that and then this next, that's absolutely doable.
Mr. Post.
Yeah, just to, this whole project is part of the American Rescue Plan funds that we would get from the money we received from the government.
Takes a big chunk out.
Yes, it does, but it still leaves us a pretty good amount.
How much would it affect, I mean, would it just be minimal savings, or would it be a sizable number if we took the basement of this building and not made it livable, just a store? Because we're looking at possibly just making that storage. No decisions have been made, but that's very, it's very possible that's what's coming down, because right now it's not a suitable working condition. So if we took the basement off, and then we also took the third floor where the Historical Society, would there be any sizable difference in the savings, or would they just be minimal savings taking those two areas off?
Yeah, I mean, basically, there's, the two things the two big pieces to the pod here are infrastructure and then distribution. So like your boiler plant, that's your infrastructure. You kind of have to do that as the base building block. But yeah, every chunk that you take out of the building is basically, there's $1 per square foot associated with that could come off the project budget, sure.
If we move forward, basically, the basement would need to be suitable for storage and not for
Well, and
people,
again,
which it's
storage
not
is a
suitable for
pretty
people
temporary
now,
term.
yeah.
We're doing some temporary storage for the state of Maine right now in Augusta where it's, got pretty specific air conditioning, dehumidification, humidification, and temperature requirements because of what they're storing. So if you want to store records down there, that's one thing, but if you want to store metal file cabinets, that's something totally different. Storing down
Yeah.
there.
The main thing is to get the people out of there, and if you've been down there, you understand
Yeah.
where we're going with that. It's not suitable. Okay. Other questions?
Madam Chair.
For our engineer, yes. Commissioner
Thank you
Larry.
for your presentation, sir. With, I guess, and probably Dave would have thought of this in his sleep, so my apologies, Dave, but will you be, is there ways or are there ways if the commission voted to, go forward with this, to, I guess I hope we can keep in timing, there's a seasonal flux with jail capacity. Sadly, I wish I didn't see anybody there, but so I'm just thinking maybe there's ways we can kind of try to time that if we do go forwards on this, and some of those various, savings. And also, is the UV treatment or ionization, et cetera, or maybe some sort of HEPA filtration, is that something that's already built in? Or is that something that you'd be considering in the future as like an add-on cost?
So I think bipolar ionization works well for terminal equipment, like a heat pump, or for a fan cooling unit that's built into a wall that's for heating and cooling. I don't think it works as well for central air. So in these scenarios, let's just use an administrative wing here in this building as an example. If we were to look at putting an energy recovery unit in, a DOAS, dedicated outdoor air unit, to move ventilation air, and we had heat pumps hanging on the wall for each of the individual spaces, then we could put the higher efficiency filtration in that central DOAS unit. And at least that way you know that anything you're pulling in is clean and capturing air.
Outside? Okay.
And anything you're exhausting, you're not blowing air back, you're catching anything that you're blowing out of the building.
It's already built, it will be filtering out. Okay, I was wondering about that.
You could always come back in later and retrofit your indoor heat pumps, your terminal units with these bipolar ionization devices. It basically, and they make them for Sanyos, they make them for Mitsubishi, Fujitsu's got one, they all have them. Basically, they're a slip-in device.
They literally just plug into the circuit board.
Exactly, yeah. So it's definitely something you can come in after the fact and do.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, with the, so what I'm trying to think of is like the heat exchanger, I've seen that in the past. Will we be using some sort of different technology so we're not potentially having something from the one side going to the other? And I'm not talking about an air escape, but just a actual somehow either, some sort of a heating coil type, some other type of heat exchanger? Or what are your thoughts with that, or do you have something different?
So it all boils down to first cost and operational efficiency. A heat exchanger with a wheel in it is probably the most efficient from an energy recovery standpoint. It'll operate at 70 to 75% efficient in both heating and cooling to transfer air. So in the middle of the winter, you're probably getting air off the fresh air coming in on a 0-degree day. You're probably getting that air back into the building at 35 or 40, which is a pretty significant savings. But all wheels move air from one side to the other, and there's a gasket that seals the airstream in between the two. And they have Some of them actually bleed a little bit of the fresh outside air in around that gasket to keep it pressurized and to keep the exhaust out. So they're a lot more effective at preventing cross-contamination than what you have in the jail now. But if we're in a science building with fume hoods, obviously, we don't want any kind of recirculation. We don't ever want to introduce the chance that if a gasket fails, we've got, sulfuric acid being trained in. So if you want to go to the other end of the spectrum, they have what they call these runaround coils, and I think you know what I'm talking about based on your question.
That's what I'm sort of envisioning, but yeah. Okay.
So where you have a coil in the outside airstream, a coil in the exhaust airstream, they don't touch each other, and you just pump glycol from one coil to the other to transfer the energy. There's never any airstream mixing. That'll operate at about 30% efficient.
Ouch.
So on a 0-degree day, you might be getting 50 degrees off it instead of 40.
If we went, obviously it's not up to me, but if we went with that wheel, I guess my concern is just from a biology background, transferring viral or bacterial particles from one airstream to the other. Maybe there's a way to fix that. I'm not thinking UV would really give you enough kill time, dwell time, so to speak, is one of the terms.
May not give that consideration because those wheels move super slowly. I mean, you can watch the rotation on those wheels. So certainly, those are all avenues that would be up for discussion.
And then UV, would you be factoring in the cost of the replacement? Because like, from my understanding with UV, with the other types of treatment, you have to replace those bulbs every 6 months or however, there's a limit life to them, and I think there are hazards afterwards, if I recall correctly, so.
Yeah, and again, with UV, I mean, if we're not in the midst of a pandemic, maybe you decide that we don't need to run and burn out bulbs every 6 months. But you have the ability to run them if you want to.
That's a good point. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Davis?
No,
Well, a
you've covered
wealth
my
of
concerns.
information, that's for sure. Thank you. No, it's been,
Well, again, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate the opportunity to work with you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
all right, well, hop back up.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Dave, can you just get us the numbers when he gets them back to you roughly for EMA in the basement?
Now, real quick on the basement. So about 2 years ago, when he first did that plan, he did give you guys a solid solution to make that space 100% livable for the basement. So when you're saying it's not applicable to refurbish it for the employees to use, they gave us a full plan to do that. So it is something you can factor in. Whether the sheriff's department is there or not, that's regardless of the point. It's, do we make the space usable or do we not make it usable? That's what you commissioners need to figure out.
Yeah. All I know is I never want to put an employee sitting with water at his feet again.
Okay.
I'm so over
But
that.
that's what the engineers are for. The engineers are here to resolve all those issues and bring us up to today's standards.
Okay. Thanks, Dave. The approved fund accounting software, am I confused about this? I thought we voted that 6-1.
So you voted to have it be purchased with ARPA money, but I need the approval of the proposal. I had to go out to bid.
Yeah, we went
Gotcha,
out,
okay.
we got
Okay.
three proposals back.
Okay, so let's take care of it then. That, hopefully that'll be a fast in and out. Yes, go right ahead.
I do have a question. Did we sound or query other counties to see what they were using?
I have, yes, I've talked to other counties. Most of them are using Munis, which really doesn't, or Trio. And both of them, and I don't think, you weren't here when I had the conversation about date-driven versus database-driven. Because of our jail being a different year than our county, the softwares that the other counties are using every year is in a different database. So I can't run a report with a jail in it because it's a different year and a different database. So when I went out to bid, went out for quotes, I just went for software that was capable of bringing the jail into with the same database. to save us and the auditors a lot of time. So I only came up with 3 that was structured that way. There may be more, but those are the ones that I could find in my search. And as you've seen the write-up, the first one, the price looked good at first until I talked to references. And it doesn't sound like it will really meet our needs without customizing, which I don't really want to go there. And the second one was a very hefty yearly price. It's like a lease payment, and it didn't have payroll, so you'd have to add on the payroll services on it. So the third one is the one that I'm requesting, recommending to be approved for purchase. And it has all of the functionality that we're looking for. The price is within the 75 that was approved for opera by the board. And the maintenance is also within my budgeted amount that I have, so.
Commissioner Ames.
That was my question. If we had a current maintenance we had to pay every year?
We do, yep, and this is within the same amount.
Okay, so it wouldn't be an
It
increase?
would not be an increase.
Okay.
Madam Chair. Did you ask the CPA who does our audit about this?
I did, and they've only really used, or familiar with Trio and Munis. They had not heard of the one that I'm recommending, but when I told them what it would do, they were very excited that we won't have to do it on Excel anymore.
Is the jail on a different fiscal year period because we want to or because we have to? Or is everybody, all the jails on the same?
So I'm going to refer that to Larry because that's before me.
It was before me too, but the way, it goes back to the BOC days when the state kind of took over a lot of the operational things, and apparently they moved jails to July, June. Now, we can move it to the same as the county or move the county to the jail. But then you have the problem of, and we've been looking at that, and ideally, you would move the county to a July, June fiscal year to combine with the jail. That means you have to borrow less tax anticipation money and so on and so forth. However, you have to pay for that extra 6 months to get onto that same operation, regardless of which way you go.
Commissioner Mark Roy, like you two gentlemen's background was in accounting, and he was really advocating that we bite the bullet some year and get on the same schedule. But no, it's not before your time. Did you have something you wanted to add to that?
No, just when the BOC came in to kind of, originally they were gonna do a county jail grab, and then they just created this authority, and they were gonna help us manage our beds. They really didn't do anything, but they repurposed us to all pretrial. They closed other places down, so we had Oxford inmates here for a while, but they made the move to move us into a fiscal year. And then 2015, we got the jails back, but the funding thing's always been a mess since that's what happened. So I think it was 2006 or 7 that might have, before that it was always calendar year. Problem it poses now is the county's got to do something one way or the other, because we're in the middle of the jail's budget that started in July and it still hasn't been approved. So this creates a problem every year, at least for us in the jail budget.
Creating a problem in the budget committee this year. Yeah.
And it was things that we wanted to incorporate that we didn't because the numbers were coming in late, and that's part of the state problem. But, you only have so many opportunities to address things, it's just hard seeing where it falls. And then, we're still waiting for our heating system to get fixed that we were told was gonna get failed from the budget a year and a half ago. So, it creates a big clog in everything, the way the budget process is now, when you're trying to get specifically capital projects done.
But the reason I had asked is if there was any savings in the long run by having that, by not needing a software that will handle two different fiscal years, periods. So apparently,
It would be quite
No.
a process to change that.
okay, well,
Yeah, and the challenge will be the 8, making up that 6 months, the 8, 1 year, we'd have to have a budget for 18 months, which would put a hardship on the towns that year.
yeah, you're opening up Pandora's box there, I guess.
So we
It's a
just,
good idea.
That's a good question, huh? It's a good question.
he said, why are we doing this? And from an accountant, that's what they're
Right,
wondering, is why are we doing this?
Some other counties that went to a fiscal year, they went through the statute, and then you could borrow the 6 months, and then the counties, the towns had 5 years to pay it, to repay that to the county. However, I looked, and one of the first things I looked at was here, and then discovered that, and I'm not sure what they're doing, but they repealed the law. So I'm not sure if you're going to change exactly how you do that, but I do need to do some more research on it, but they repealed that section.
All right, so, and I don't want to shut questions off if anybody has any more questions about this.
Madam Chair, very quickly, if I
Yes,
may,
go
please.
ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Treasurer Proctor, for providing that ahead of time and really taking some detail on it. Just one question. Will I think Abila is the one that you're requesting us to approve. Will they provide assistance in, my assumption is we're migrating that data over. Okay, and they provide, it's a fairly airtight setup. They're going to, they've got a good service contract where they're actually going to make sure they get it done right for you. Okay, and then second question is just on the, well, same term, but probably using it wrongly, but service contract, will they continue to, will you have the proper help and assistance as they do like patches and upgrades over the years? Okay, so that's built into that maintenance?
We'll have a yearly maintenance agreement.
Mhm.
And then we actually have, they provide for just a tiny bit to add on, which I definitely recommend. So regular support, where you just call and they call you back within 12 hours, 24 hours or whatever.
I guess one of the questions is super expensive. I realize, you took it out to bid, and I appreciate that, but just, are all of these tend to be that high, and is Trio untenable, unusable, or just to the point that it's, a stone, chiseling in stone, so to speak, or?
So Trio I didn't actually go with Trio, look into Trio. I think that may be cheaper, because that's what a lot of the counties use, but it has a lot of glitches in it. I've used it before, and it's got a lot of glitches, and it doesn't have that date-driven issue, so it would not do anything for us, for our problem. And Munis, the same thing, and that's like very expensive, way more than this, and it still has the same database issue.
Thank you.
Okay, and just for help with the motion, is Abila an acronym, or is that the name?
Abila is the
Abila,
name, yeah, and
okay.
MIT is the.
Just so when you make your motion, you know what you're doing, whether we're giving out letters or giving out a name. So, commissioners,
I'd like to make, Commissioner Poirier would like to make a motion that we take the advice of our treasurer, and we purchase the Abelia MIP fund accounting software.
I second that motion.
okay, thank you. And any other questions before we take the vote? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed?
Opposed. I would request the minutes to reflect, while I appreciate the information provided, I still disagree that the federal government should be taking our money and then giving it back to us. They should leave it in our hands. Thank you.
Okay. Sheriff, you probably didn't know if we were going to get to you tonight or not. Yes, oh, I'm sorry, did I
Madam
miss
Chair,
something?
Under the opera proposals, and then there was,
Oh,
are you going to vote on those tonight?
okay, approval of requests for the flooring and the roofing.
The HVAC, that's the $6,469,000, and then the flooring and roofing, we took out of Dave's budget, and that's 20 and 50 is 70,000.
Honest, I'm not ready to vote on that HVAC yet, but
Great.
I'm okay with going forward with the flooring and roofing if we took that out of his budget.
No, I am as well.
Would you like to put that in a motion?
I move
Commissioner
to
Ames?
approve the cost for the flooring and roofing.
Second that motion?
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed?
Opposed, thank you.
Okay. And we'll hear from the sheriff now, and with the recent news articles yesterday and today, this has going to become a bigger issue.
I remember attending a meeting a while ago where you guys had a goal of getting out of here by 8, so I'll try to be to the point, quick. If you have questions, be happy to answer. You heard here tonight how somebody said Sabatis just had a
Barely.
meeting the other night, and I'll get right to it. Their chief basically said, I need to give my employees $4 an hour across the board raises. And the town voted that night to give him $80,000 to get that done. Doesn't necessarily mean they'll get $4 an hour across the board, but they gave him some cash to do it. Earlier this week, Mechanic Falls, it looks like what they did is gave $3 an hour across the board. Back in June, I wrote to you guys, basically telling you my concern with our pay scale and what we would be paying our employees next year compared to what Lewis and Auburn and the state police were paying last year and this year, and Lisbon as well. Since then, Lisbon's come up and spoke to me about how they were opening up their contract as well to make wage adjustments. I think you guys know where we fall. Again, I would encourage you, and I tried to hit you up before the budget season to possibly do that. At the same time, I think you would all recognize that have been involved that we've managed the pandemic very well in the correctional facility. So originally, when I was talking to you, because the amount of investment and the shortages that I recently explained to you all, just in this area, never mind what's going on across the state. Originally, I was hitting up to the patrol deputies, because I'm really concerned. And when Commissioner Krishner called me, I said, well, at this point, next year, I'm gonna be probably saying, I told you so. But that will accomplish nothing, because I value all the employees we have here. We have a really good blend of people with different sets of skills and interests. We've invested in them for training, and it'll be very easy for most of them to go to another agency and make far more money. At the same time, we offer things that some agencies don't, which is why we've attracted 3 of our most recent hires, and there's probably more, that took between $3 and $5 an hour pay cuts before these adjustments were going on. So again, I would encourage you to possibly look at some sort of adjustment and not wait for negotiations next year for 2023, especially with what Mechanic Falls and Sabatis has done or is looking to do, and Lisbon apparently the same thing. I brought it to the Budget Committee's attention last week, because a lot of the people there are elected officials in these cities and towns. You know, Lewis and Auburn knows. When I went to Lewiston and spoke to some administration there, and I said, could you slow it down a little bit, because we're not moving at all. And so they said, well, this should help you to address your issues, but it hasn't at this point. So that's one consideration. The other is when the state police changed their call sharing agreement, we're dealing with issues in corrections where our employees are being recruited as well. They're actually calling our employees and saying, we'll give you this because you're using the ARPA money to make adjustments. So there's one county in particular that has created this formula where an employee were to go there, they'll pay them $4 above whatever their rate was for like 6 months or a year. Then it goes down to $2, then $1 until their next contract where their scale will be adjusted. So there's huge cash incentives. So at one point I was asking for, I think, $1.25 across the board for just patrol. I'd actually request that you give $1 across the board to the employees. And to do that from January to July, because of how the jail budget runs, in January to December, it's about $130,000. I think patrol needs a little bit more, far, above and beyond that. Just throwing an idea out there. The other issue is with the changes in the call sharing agreement. We knew we were going to get a higher call volume. We've proved that we get a higher call volume
we watched it. We got 2 of those grant positions. We put those at night because of the way the state police also schedules. But we're not able to keep up with the calls during the day, because one thing we overlooked, and maybe we didn't, but maybe we didn't realize the effect of it, is we're traveling from Wales to Minot, from Livermore to Durham. So not only are we getting a larger call volume, we're covering a larger area because there's nobody there to assist us. And with some of the shortages the smaller agencies are having, we're answering their calls, where we always provided backup. We provide backup at times to Lewiston Auburn. Our original intent was to request 2 additional deputies for this year. We didn't do that for a number of reasons. One is I don't know who we'd attract. And then there's capital issues that go along with it. I felt it was a bad year financially to probably try that. I was hoping there would be an adjustment, but I'm watching the numbers come in and talking to staff. It's just not very favorable. So the second letter I wrote to you about the staffing levels is because of the conversations. I don't want to say grumblings, because it's legitimate, but the conversation I have with administrations at other agencies, what I'm seeing from my staff, the frustrations they're experiencing. If the state police is around, they will assist, but it's an if. I don't want to talk about the change in the state police contract, because that's done. That's just the new reality. We need to move on. This is how it's going to be. I appreciate the state police for their specialty units, like the TAC team, when called to assist, they're always there for that. But the routine patrol, and I hate using that word, it's on us most of the time. So I want to bring these things to your attention, because I don't want to end up like Mechanic Falls is now, or what Sabattis is going through. At the same time, as in dealing with these people, I'm not a big one to throw money at a problem, but when you look at the wage scales locally and across the state, money is actually short here. So I was asked to bring things we talk about and concerns we have to the commissioner's attention. That's what I'm doing. You can do what you want with it. And when we're leaving these meetings, like I went to the Sabattis town meeting, they're trying every effort they can, but they also realize that the county offers more to attract. The specialties, promotional opportunities, in-service training, we're a larger group, cover a bigger area. There's reasons people leave some of the small towns. The call volume's more, a little bit too much right now. But anyway, so some residents spoke to me and sent me messages later saying, appreciate me being there, telling them the truth and the reality of it all, but they feel 6 months to a year, they'll probably be revisiting the same issue, contracting again, like we do with Poland. But Mechanic Falls and Sabattis are giving every effort to save their agencies. Apparently adjusting salaries is the big one. We have a lot of things in place from listening to the interim chief in Sabattis. He's starting to do now what I started 7 years ago, so we're farther along the process. But we were clearly behind when I looked at Mechanic Falls wages today. Before it was Lewiston Auburn State Police and Lisbon. We're behind everybody now. So last application pool we had, there was no one new to the field. It was all existing employees from other agencies. Typically, it's been 50-50, 60-40. We've always attracted people with experience because we're a good agency and they know it. But anyway, but when you have nobody new to the field applying that 40% or the 50%, that's concerning. And when I take the time to meet with people so they don't jeopardize their current employment, because people talk and go over, when we get to the wages, we lose a lot of interest. And when we're losing interest, we're losing talent and things of that nature. And I don't want to lose the talent we've acquired here. So that's all, and you'll be out of here by 8. If you have any questions now or at any time, and I know you weren't here when I sent out the wages.
I read the letters, though.
Yeah, I gave a breakdown of what Lewiston Auburn State Police and Lisbon pay, now and last year, and what we'll be paying next year, and there's a disparity. At the time, I said Sabattis and Mechanic Falls aren't really a factor. They are now. They all pay, well, Mechanic Falls officially pays more than us now. I think Sabattis will end up. And then it's grown into a problem with
corrections in our, that's why I said, maybe you do $1 across the board for everybody. Just an idea, and I know it's not my place, but something more than that dollar needs to be considered for the patrol division. And the other thing I have, as a long-term former employee and as your sheriff, is I think there's a lot of benefits to having one negotiating team, one union for all labor. And, the disparity in wages from what our patrol is making compared to other agencies is great, it's huge. And I'd hate to see the unions separate, so we'd have 3 or 4 different contracts going for the 3 or 4 different divisions, because patrol feels they can't address their wage gaps with other agencies, so they go it alone. I think it would help to keep the union together, to show that you can effectively have one bargaining agreement with wage scales that are paying you for what you're doing. So patrol won't be penalized because, they've already got their own Schedule A, Schedule B type thing. It's just hard when they're probably a third of the union membership to say, hey, we need to really address this. So any consideration you can do, I don't know if it's too late now. And any questions you have, I'd be happy to answer. And thank you for the opportunity to at least hit you all up at the same time rather than just through correspondence.
Post?
My only addition to the presentation is that I've been approached by the union president, and the union contract does expire at the end of next year. And he wants to meet and get a new contract in January. So we'll be looking at coming to you with that date. Not that
Right,
then,
just a
but
side note.
just so you know.
So the price tag for this is not included in the current budget?
No.
In June, I sent out the letter to the commissioners about the wages, and I was just specific, that's about 50, at the time was about a $50,000, $60,000 price tag. But what happened where we could come up with this patrol thing is the budget committee was kicking around this idea to pay for some existing staff using the ARPA money because of lost revenue, and we had made 4 corporals positions, but it would have put us in the hole down the road. So it kind of got my wheels spinning, and my wheels spin a lot, by the way, you'll get used to it. But I said, well, if you can pay for positions out of that, and I know law enforcement positions can be paid out of that, don't pay for existing positions because it's going to cause us budget problems next year. Why don't you just pay for the 2 positions I need now, or my guys need now, because there's bebopping across the county all the time. Specifically where we're short now is on the days. It's just, in days there's more traffic, there's more going on. So when, going from the emergency call to Wales and Minot or Livermore to Durham, I'm just giving you those, and it happens when you only have 2 guys on the road. Rural patrol is a little different than, what you're used to with, when you have your own municipality or contract for services. You basically, get 2 or 3 guys out covering everywhere. But we're getting a lot of, over the past 2 years, I think what's happened is people aren't calling with the simple calls anymore. A lot of the political movements, but when you're not calling about the simple calls, things are escalating. So when we're getting calls, they're more serious in nature. At least that's what I'm seeing. There's a lot more, we work with NAMI a lot about tracking our mental health related calls. And what's happening to those people. Are they going to ER? Is somebody coming out there? Are they ending up in jail? Which you don't want them to end up in jail, crisis calls. Those numbers, we average 20 to 30 a month, which for a rural area, these are people calling from homes. It's not like you see somebody in a crisis in Denny's parking lot. So the level of calls we're responding to even during the day is a little bit higher in intensity than what we had seen 5 years prior.
It's not in the, but that's why, even though our agenda was really pretty heavy to put something like this on, if it was the will of the commissioners to consider something, time now is really of the essence, because we would have to get it to the budget committee, there
The other thing I
by
thought,
the
because
20th.
comments that have been made this year is, we're planning on doing this sometime. Sooner or later, we're gonna need those 2 new positions. So it won't come out of nowhere. I'm
telling you whatever the date is tonight, that in next year's budget, if it isn't addressed beforehand, get ready to see it. You know, and we did have good reasons for not asking for it this year. It's just, it's putting a lot of pressure on staff.
Can the funds come out of a transfer? Is there another area in the budget that you can transfer money to the salary account?
They've already taken all the money we've got anywhere.
We're stuck here, right?
Well, yeah, if we were going, that's why I wanted to discuss it tonight, because if the commissioners wanted to do something, we would need to get it to the budget committee before the 20th. That's why, even though tonight it was a little too
Okay,
heavy
well,
to do
The
it.
question is, what are the options? What are our options, except my giving you some cash here to help out, you know?
I'm not a union member.
That's true. Your administration, okay.
Well, yeah, that brings another question up. Can we even do this on our own, or do we need to meet with the union before we can do something like
You
this?
can approach me and say, hey, we would like you to open up your contract because we want to offer you more money. And I don't think.
No,
would
they
object.
probably won't close that down, right? They
But
probably
like I
won't
said,
shut
when I
us
wrote
down
to them
there.
when I wrote to the commissioners in June, I could see what was coming with patrol, because I knew who was talking about resigning, and sure enough, they have. And I have another one that let me know he'll be resigning a little bit later. So the idea was, hey, why don't we get ahead of this? Since then, the problem's gotten worse for patrol, but it's also grown into my other divisions. That's why, so the $1.25 I was asking for patrol at the time, and to do away with the 8-year transfer, I'd say just give $1 to everybody, but you need to give more to patrol because we're so far out of the market now. You're gonna be sitting there in January, and it's gonna be like it was in 7, 8 years ago when they said, we want a $4 raise, and everybody kind of dropped. They're gonna sit there this January and say, we want a $4 an hour raise, and you know what? They probably won't be the highest paid agency in our county. They'd probably be third, fourth, maybe even fifth.
Thing is that we do what we can to keep ourselves out of the position that Cumberland's in tonight.
Yes, that's, yeah. And a lot of agencies are. And, you know, and I know we always look out for the taxpayers, but part of looking out for the taxpayers is the service we provide to them. And me and the people under my employ or our employ, I think they pride themselves on coming here and doing their jobs, doing them well. I just hope to retain them.
I didn't realize this till tonight, but you probably have all heard about the Cumberland situation, and Sheriff, you said that's not the only county that's in a shutdown?
Yeah, we had a problem with.
Lockdown, I guess, is the
We ran
correct
out of
term.
holding cells. We couldn't divert to Two Bridges because they had lockdown, couldn't divert to Cumberland because they had lockdown too. So we literally we had to call a judge who had to revisit specifically the holding. It wasn't a head count issue. We lack a holding area cells, and they got filled up through a number of things. But, and with the delays in getting test results back from the CDC, we were getting them back, send them today, get them tomorrow. And the CDC changed how they do it, so sometimes it's taking us 3-4 days to get the results back. And those people sit in holding for 3-4 days, and they build up. So it was a Friday afternoon, and all of a sudden, we were full. And we weren't, you know, we ended up getting 2 back from the CDC, so we got to put them in population. The judge revisited, so it created some room, and we somehow made it through the weekend. That was a first, but when we called all the existing jails that we usually do business with, they were all closed for business, so.
Madam Chair.
Let's get some, Commissioner Poyer?
So in the original budget that was presented to us, there was a salary increase in that.
The cost of living. Here.
Cost of living, yeah.
Living.
This contract
This is separate from that, is that correct? I just want to make sure I understand what we're talking about.
In June, when I sent the request, it was because I could kind of see what was happening, and I knew that everybody was opening up their contracts to adjust the wages, and I already knew we were a little lower, so I wrote it in there, hoping that maybe there would be some consideration of adding an amount to address it, and then there was no response. Then I see what the employees are going through. We talked administratively, then we start meeting with the small towns about what they're doing, and start looking at the call volume issues and safety concerns with that. We wrote another letter, letting you guys know what staffing is like. and how it's a competitive field and there's limited applicants. So, two different purposes, but I'm just bringing them both up here tonight for you to consider, not necessarily tonight, but unless you want to do something. No.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I understand, and I want to make sure our pay is reasonably competitive, but I feel like our pay has never necessarily been on par with the two cities or other locations, but people stay here for one reason or another. I want to make sure they're paid enough. And I full well recognize we're seeing inflation that's insane, partially because of COVID overreactions and unconstitutional mandates. But I guess what I'm trying to understand is I need to know what the full cost would be, because we're talking $1 an hour or we're talking 130,000, and then almost always there's the benefit side of it as well. There's a main PERS and all the other fringe that increases that to maybe 200,000 or whatever. So I guess I would need to know more. And then I'm also hearing from one of my towns that they're gravely concerned about basically a 12.4% budget increase and asking for a $710,000 reduction. That's been basically brought forth by the budget committee. So I understand both sides of it, but I guess I'm just trying to understand why in the world are all these other places paying more? Is there a nationwide shortage of, and can you distill why? I mean.
That over the past 2 years, some of the movements that have gone on have discouraged a lot of people from entering the field. I have a child, senior in college, who's looking forward to potentially trying out law enforcement. She's reconsidered. So I think you'll see that with a lot of young people. I think you saw a mass exodus with local agencies of people that were qualified but were probably holding off, that retired. So what you saw nationwide was happening here as well. Then you have, the other issue is there's a delay and a backlog with the academy because of COVID things. It affected the nation. And I'll tell you, like I told the budget committee, the past 2 years is gonna be very costly for public safety now and in the future. And inflation, it all compounds. Nate, you got any thoughts? Am I missing anything? Nate's one of our detectives, and he wanted to come up and see.
Yeah, I mean, we're being outpaced at an unprecedented rate with local agencies. And one of the big things I think our admin's been trying to do is, we are losing people through retirement, but also there's a real threat of losing people through other agencies that are offering, that are paying. And we want to surround ourselves with good, competent officers that are good talent, and we don't want to be getting the bottom of the barrel. And we're at a spot where our wages, no good talent's going to come here, and that's who we want to surround ourselves with.
And we won't hire the bottom of the barrel, as Nate describes it. I've said since the beginning, I'm not just gonna fill seats. I got no interest in doing it.
We don't have a lot of applicants.
In the line, we hired, we went through the whole applicant pool the last time. We have a vacancy now. I don't know if we'll get any applicants for it. We've always been under Lewis and Auburn, and for some reason it was always acceptable or almost a demand of the union. That's a long historical thing where you kind of question it. But, yeah, and I think a part, if you ever attend a budget committee meeting, you'll see how the wheels squeak. And maybe that's what's discouraged commissioners historically from being on par with Lewis and Auburn. I find it, I won't say it because it'll end up being in the paper, but it's just discouraging that the attitudes are different when budget committee members are dealing with their own employees, but yet they're here paying attention to just scrubbing budgets without realizing our employees are not being treated the same as you would treat yours. And I understand you always are very adamant about the responsibility of the taxpayers, and I understand you're talking about your residents, the budget increases. But we have 150 employees, I guess. Most of the cost of running county government is labor. And as you note, everything you do with labor affects every part of the budget. So those are the drivers that are there. And the county is exempt from the cost of doing business. And I'm not saying that to insult you, it's almost like a message to.
I don't feel insulted.
Okay, you know, because when I deal with the budget committee, you know, you're looking at that, we're not a revenue driven, we're a service driven. You know, and unfortunately, you've got some places that bring in a revenue, you know, civil deeds, probate, I guess, we bring in accident report. It's just, that's not our purpose. So part of the responsibility of taxpayers is providing them with public safety, with the services they, you know, want, and it's rural patrol, so we're not asking to have our rural patrol be able to respond like Mechanic Falls, Servatus, Lewis and Auburn, or even our Poland contract deputies. But there should be a reasonable expectation, especially, I think we had a call a couple weeks ago where they were dealing with an incident in Minot, and there was a domestic situation somewhere else, but everybody we had in the incident was, I think it was in Minot, was tied up there. So here you got, you know, sending a guy to a domestic where the policy calls for 2, we just didn't have the staffing available. And that domestic means that there's a victim. When you start seeing those things happen all the time, you know, you asked, what do we talk about? I figured this is a big one, so I'll let you guys know what we talk about. What keeps me awake at night is losing the staff. You know, Jeff, the jail administrator, and I, we talk about what keeps him awake compared to what keeps me awake. And I just want 100% staffing, and I want the cars done, because not having our cars brings a lot of stress. His stresses are a little different. Mine, I think we can be in control of. So I brought to your attention, if you can think of anything. It just really shocked me when I heard they were looking at whatever the money is called, to pay for existing positions and how that would have damaged the budget. And I said, well, if you could pay for existing positions, you might as well provide what we need with it, and we'll ask for the increase next year. Because, you know, we work really hard to keep the budgets in line and to address issues all at the same time. And I think we're fairly effective at it. So that was one thing. The pay increase, I threw it out there for you guys before. Nothing was done, and I don't mean it to sound like that. It's actually gotten worse, and it probably includes all divisions. And yes, I came up with $130,000 based on the whole agency. I have no idea how it affects the 6% for Maine State Retirement, or the 8% for FICA, or I don't imagine it costs medical insurance, anything. But we have like 5 vacancies in the jail right now. And 2 of them were recruited from another agency, and they actually called our employees to say, here's what we'll give you to come. That's something new to the field.
To just maybe let them know. I know we can't, but yeah, when they call and ask us to take care of their inmates, it just, yeah, it's a shame for the taxpayer. Thank you.
You guys all set? I don't want to take up any more of your time.
You're already way over your.
I know. I like watching Chicago Fire at 9, so. Thank you for your time, and if you want anything, take anything under consideration or address any of it, the staff would appreciate it, and so would I. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, discussion.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I would just state, looking at, I appreciate the sheriff bringing up these concerns. A lot of these are social issues. That's why we've, these officers are fed up with being disrespected and hated. I won't name parties, but there's been parties that have been quite quiet against these groups that have been very hateful to law enforcement altogether. And while police brutality should never be tolerated, there's a vast majority of officers that go in the line of duty every day and don't, their job is they treat things with equality, they do their job, and they want to just come home at the end of the day. And that's what we're dealing with, this whole nightmare because of a lack of biblical morality. And I guess here we are once again paying for that when it should have never been happening before. COVID's put stress, or these COVID overreaches have put stress on these officers again. And I think this is really wrong that here we are, we're making the taxpayer pay for this. I understand the need, and I want to make sure our officers are safe, our deputies, and chief deputy, and all that are in the line of duty. And yet, at the same time, here we are dealing with, and this is why I think we should really consider this resolution. We have over 100 employees. Whether we as commissioners want or not, whether we think it's a good idea or not, whether we think it's our job or not, we will be receiving, if Biden passes this, a order to make our employees get injected. These injections are based off of aborted baby, some so-called fetal cells. While they may not contain the cell, they're based off of that and may have contamination. Many people have sincerely held religious beliefs against that. And I would hope this commission would stand and say, no, this is wrong, and we're not going to make our employees do this. And this may very well, as many of you, those that have been here, may recall, the sheriff mentioned when we looked at using, I think maybe ARPA money in the past, of giving a couple $100 bonus to, or incentive for deputies to get the injection. And really, that there was a low number or a mid-range number of how many people had already gotten it. And so I guess we've done a lot of things. We've kicked the public out in the past and kept them completely remote in the name of employees feeling safe. Will this commission stand for their employees when they're being forced by an unconstitutional order to take an injection? And I would just point out that the booster shot could mean millions for Big Pharma. That's from your own article, sir. So this is very important. Madam Chair, this is discussion items, commissioners only, so commissioners may discuss.
Is what, if you want to now do something to solve this, the problem we're faced with.
Madam Chair, that was not just, there was complete silence for like 5, I counted, and I did not say anything. I waited to consider because I thought somebody, but point of order, this is discussion items, commissioners only. I am a commissioner and you're cutting me off.
But you don't
No, I
care
know, okay, I
about
will
how
gavel
we
you.
feel.
That's
Gavel
wrong,
everyone.
Madam Chair.
I
I
will
appeal the
gavel you
ruling of the
again.
board, I appeal the ruling of the chair by motion. That is in order, and that is wrong. You allowed a bunch of silence. I assume we
Motion for
moved on.
recess, please. Second for recess. We are in recess until the next time, though, it will be too late to take this to the budget committee.
You can recess until the time of the gavel.
Madam Chair.
Okay, let's just take it, we're on a 5-minute recess. We're all back.
Okay, then let's discuss. There was
Oh, we're
plenty
5
of
minutes.
silence.
No, we're on a recess. We are vote, we're on a recess. No more discussion.
Okay, so you're going to go
No more
talk with your
discussion.
fellow commissioners and
Sit
then come
right
back?
here, buddy.
Take a recess. I'm going to take a recess. That's what I'm going to do.
Was there a vote held?
All in favor of taking a recess? Thank you. and then we will go back to the subject that we
Literally
were
have no
discussing.
energy for this right now.
I know.
So as I was saying, Big Pharma stands to make billions after these booster shots. Do you think they might be standing to make billions off of making people get an injection that they don't wish to? If you want to get the injection, go get as many as you want and you're legally allowed. But don't force your employees, don't force people via unconstitutional mandates, whether it's Governor Mills, who is wrong, or President Biden, who is wrong. And I would oppose President Trump if he said that people had to do this and tried to use OSHA to do the same thing. Nobody has that authority to do this. This is wrong. And if we're really concerned about standing for people, if we're really concerned about employee safety, then we're not going to make them get something or stand idly by. We have a responsibility at the end of the day to say, you know what, if they won't if they won't follow the proper procedure, then sometimes we have to step out. But we still have the fact that we're swore an oath to uphold the Constitution. That gives us the authorization to say, no, this is wrong. We can at least pass a resolution. It's just a non-binding resolution. It should be real simple, but we keep on holding that off. We've got priorities for sheriff, we got priorities for spending, but we don't have priorities to stand up for people's constitutional rights. This is wrong. No, I have the floor. So this needs, that's enough. Out of order.
No, you are out of order. You do not.
I apologize
No,
for
back
snapping
it-
my
no,
fingers,
you are
but this
done
is
now.
inappropriate to
Actually,
keep.
you're done.
Yeah, but
You're
you
actually
allow
done.
everybody
No,
else to
we're-
say stuff.
move
I
on.
apologize for snapping my fingers, but I've listened to you
are
allow
way out of
Michaels
order.
yell at other
You
people and
are
others.
way out of order.
And you are too, Madam Chair, multiple times.
Commissioner Ames.
Madam Chair? Would,
Before, you want to weigh in before,
No,
because can I let Commissioner Ames, he's been waiting
let him go ahead.
to talk, and go ahead.
Question. I wholeheartedly support voting for no vaccine mandates. I'm not gonna vote for your mandate, for your resolution, just for the simple fact that instead of coming to us for a discussion and coming up with something as a collective board, you email it to 25 different people and then try to bring people in to demand us to put it on there. In your comment about talking to people outside, you've reached out to friends to lobby my decision on things. So,
I couldn't get a hold of you. I tried.
no, you didn't try, you never called. me.
I've reached out to you.
So, we'll back out now. If you would have brought a resolution to the board, I am, again, more than happy to.
Then
vote
write
on
it
something.
yourself. Write one
I
yourself.
want
Then have that
everybody's
one in.
discussion. My issue is how you approached it. You sent it off to the newspaper, you sent it off to 25, how you doing? Keep recording, again, use your son as a pawn, great.
That is out of order. Objection. Madam Chair, that would be out of order.
Apologize.
Do not insult my son. You can insult
didn't
me and call
insult
me a
your son.
dirtbag,
I
but don't
didn't
insult my
insult
son.
your
He's not a
son.
pawn.
I didn't insult
Do
your son.
not ever call
I
my son again.
apologize to you.
Apologize to him, sir.
Madam Chair?
Take a seat.
Guys, not just, I'm sorry, buddy. He's
No.
not buddy. He's my son.
Commissioner Larry.
Then you could have used the gavel against him.
I can't. I can't, because all you're doing is screaming over me.
Most of the time
I
you
can't-
ignore my
okay,
objection.
I'm not, I'm really.
Madam Chair.
That's all. Can we just move on?
Move it, show. What are we doing?
Please
Jerry
just move
Springer.
on. That we,
Do not insult my son.
okay. Can we, let's go back to, let's go back to the sheriff's issue.
We were elected to help the county administrator run the county. We've received a request from the sheriff's department regarding recruitment and retention. He's suggesting a $3 to $4 adjustment in salaries. Am I correct in basically summing that?
Here is $1, plus a little extra for patrol. And what what I'm hearing is to go back to Budget Committee to have them increase. And I will tell you exactly what the Budget Committee will do. They will vote to take any increase out of the ARPA funds, which they've done, and in part of the budget taken out. So I would suggest not going back to the Budget Committee, but simply using ARPA funds, of which is, that will be what they will do anyway. And this body has the authority to take some of those funds and add that to the sheriff's salary.
Yeah, I'd like to hear some discussion about that. Yeah, go ahead.
And we think the ARPA funds will qualify for that?
The lost revenue funds will. And we do have, some of that money, we have enough of that money left. don't want to spend it on just, because there are certain things that, capital things that we need to do, but at the same time, this will do that.
Go ahead, Commissioner
How would
Ames.
that work if we use the ARPA funds? Is it a set number we're allowed to use? To put towards it?
The lost revenue portion of the ARPA funds, you can use for several different operational things. Law enforcement is one of those things you can use it for.
And I know there'll be some that may disagree with this. I have never been in favor of the state or the government increasing the minimum wage, because I've always felt like the market will take care of that. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing right now, is the market is raising the minimum wage. We don't need, bureaucracies to come in and do it. The market itself is adjusting the wage. It may be unfortunate, I'm a business owner, I feel like it's unfortunate, I'm paying more than ever, but the market is adjusting what we need to, where our starting wage is getting very close in the jail, at least, to what fast food. And if you had your choice between sitting in a jail and having people get sick on you in the middle of the night, like I know happens, or, having a job that didn't carry as much pressure and responsibility, that, all that to say, the market, I believe, is adjusting the wage, and it's a tough, where we're responsible for the budget, it's a tough issue. But
Getting down to brass tacks, will save the taxpayers a ton of money if there's, if all the deputies, choose to leave. But at what cost? You know what I'm saying? Public safety.
We're not
That's the
saving.
cost.
Yeah.
And I mean, just when you look at a place like Cumberland County having to lock down because they don't have enough employees, that's a big backup to what he's telling us. Go ahead.
I would be in favor of what you mentioned. Would a motion be in proper at this point to do that?
I'd support that.
Actually, we're
Someone
gonna,
else
we're
answer
gonna
that.
discuss the Save America money later anyway, so we would just bring it up then. And it looks like the board is intent upon doing that.
I think we have to.
It solves a big problem with today's discussion.
Things are crumbling really in a slow motion, and so I feel that we need to be progressive and act rather than just don't act and let things get worse. That's my feeling.
I agree.
I mean, I felt like the time was really critical because of the 20th.
Yeah, see,
But with what
I
you're
think we'll
saying-
be asking for trouble if you suddenly go to the budget committee and say, we want to, a bunch more money added to the budget because, and I think you can, and again, it'll amount to the same thing, but I think you can simply, when we know exactly what we're talking, the numbers we're talking, and then you can determine and move forward to take that out of the,
So
Lost
before
revenue.
the next meeting, or not, could you, do you think?
would do it
work
probably the
those
meeting
numbers out?
after.
The next meeting's tight.
Yeah.
Everything in the next, we've got a ton of stuff the next meeting, you're right. Okay.
And-
But if you could
and your
get us
next
those
meeting-
numbers, so we have
Your next
numbers that
meeting
we're-
is the meeting of the Budget Committee's public hearing and final meeting, so
Yeah, we
you're
have
going to
to
be
be out
really
here.
constrained with timeline.
Okay. Yeah, the next, until we can get out through budget season, things are a little tight.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So I still think, I understand the reasoning, but this is another last-minute addition of expenditures. We've seen this, I think, 2 years in a row now, I think from the same department. And my constituents are hurting as well. These costs are going up. One of my towns reached out about the increases that are going on at this county level. Well, I recognize minimum wage and all of that. Most of this is based upon because of disrespect of police and a culture of disrespect of law enforcement. So I support them, and I want to make sure that we have enough officers and deputies on call. I want to make sure that we're not costing our constituents an arm and a leg once again at the 11th hour. We should have heard about this, and if we really felt that this was so necessary, we should have voted upon it when we were doing the budget review. But the commission did not think it was necessary for whatever reason. So
Okay,
Future agenda?
we'll,
No, we're gonna
Oh, you
bring
think
it
he
up.
said to wait?
We're gonna bring it up later, right?
yeah, we're gonna, but we'll have actual numbers when can we have actual numbers?
We'll have to work through that, yes,
Okay.
yes, we will. We'll have a recommendation for you.
Madam Chair, will that include the
Everyone, if that's
main Persian stuff?
2 meetings out, because this next meeting is going to be, is the public hearing.
Well, when does the budget have to be ratified?
Well, what his suggestion, and maybe we ought to back up, make sure that's what everybody wants to do. What the administrator's suggestion is that we do not put it in the budget this year. We take it out of lost revenue based on the fact that we're losing employees because of things that have happened, which would qualify. So we put it in lost revenue. Of course, a lot of our increases this year were because of lost revenue into the county. I guess we just hold our breath and hope those revenues come back in a year. Otherwise, next year's budget is going to be tough.
It'll, yeah, no, I go giving up predicting, but at the same time, you know, the Budget Committee's recommendation that you have in front of you drastically cuts and unfortunately, they're using a lot more revenue than we had wanted to use because we don't have, you know, we used it all last year, but they're draining it. So, and, you know, and I understand the, you know, concern about, even though the expenditure increase isn't very much, but because of the fact of the revenue and how things, you know, progress. And so they made some severe cuts and did move a lot of, about 140,000 over into the, or recommended that you move that over into the ARPA funds. But, you know, we still can use that same funding for the law enforcement as we need to.
So do you understand why that 20th date now? You know, when I came into this thinking if this was going to be what the commissioners wanted to do, we were really under a date gun. But with this suggestion, we are not under, that sort of puts it in a different, but I don't know that that's what the board wants to do. It's a board decision.
When you get us the numbers, are you gonna have the healthcare costs and whatever associated costs will be included?
Healthcare costs won't increase. Your Social Security and the other part can. And I think we can,
Life insurance.
yeah, we can also, you know,
Motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, future agenda items. Madam Chair, just before we move from discussion items, I would just like to clarify, on numerous occasions, I've heard another commissioner, Commissioner Michaels, state, "I have the floor," I believe he said. So I said basically the same thing, and I've heard you say that. I'm quite sure. If not, please correct me, I apologize. But so in being interrupted by a fellow commissioner, that is extremely frustrating, and there's a chronic way of, one way of doing things for myself as a commissioner and another way of doing things for all of the commissioners, and whether you agree with me or not, Madam Chair, there is a requirement for the chair to be unbiased. So I would just ask, if you're going to start gaveling, you make sure you gavel other people as well, because in anticipation, that's why I spoke out.
under future agenda items?
We are, thank
Okay. Just want to make sure at the right place.
Yes, it's hard, we
As
made
per the
it.
bylaws, as a commissioner, I believe I could make a suggestion to have something added to the bylaws. And that would be the contracts that we currently have with the towns that use our 911 call service.
Okay.
I would like to be able to approach it, giving them enough lead-up time, so that they realize that those contracts need to be reviewed. I believe from previous discussions, they are up for renewal in June of '22.
I think there are only two that are July, June, and the rest are a calendar year, so I think that would be the first of '23.
Well, if we could put it on the agenda in the first meeting in January.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, can
I-
we jump ahead a few meetings?
But I guess the reason I'm suggesting it tonight is I want to give Larry time to put the information together.
Okay.
So hopefully that's helpful to you. Instead of saying, I want to know about it 30
Yes.
days from now, I'd like to tell you 90 days from now.
Right.
You know, we realistically need to go back and look at that, as our costs have gone up, and that service needs to be reevaluated as far as how we're pricing it.
Okay. Were you,
Future agenda?
Madam Chair?
will you wait a minute so
No, wait.
Commissioner Larry can go ahead?
I would just request, as I have in the past, that the opening up of the executive session would be added to the agenda. That is well past due, and the lawyer told us that we could take a vote to open up that executive session and the supporting legal documentation, so there's no reason not to. And we should at least have a vote on it, and then the commission may choose whether to do that or not. Furthermore, I ask that the resolution that I submitted on Wednesday, this past Wednesday, be added on to the agenda. This is in the purview of the commission. It affects our constituents directly, so it should be added on to the agenda, and there's no reason not to, and no bylaws reason that permits it. And furthermore, my son is not a pawn. He's a mature young man, and I will never put up with that
We've
kind of
already dealt
comment
with-
again.
That's not future agenda
Yeah,
item.
I wish you had been quick with the gavel, Madam Chair.
Commissioner has apologized. I would like to move on.
Motion to adjourn. No. Sorry.
No, he
Sorry,
he was
Commissioner
actually
Michael.
up, and Commissioner
I know you
Larry
wanna
wanted to
go.
go ahead of him,
Okay, I
so
have
let's
future-
go back to.
Future agenda item, which I think is
Okay.
supposed to be presented in writing. I have this in writing. I want to clarify the method to which items are added to the agenda, and I also want to clarify the responsibilities of the chair and clarify add an additional path for a commissioner to put an item on the agenda for the next meeting, for instance, after today, but before the next meeting. And so I would change Section 14, item for meeting, Section 2, such that it reads, except as provided in the section, all agenda items must be approved by the chair for inclusion on the agenda. The chair may, in consultation with the county administrator, use his/her discretion in placing and scheduling items for the agenda, and then cross out, provided that the chair may not unreasonably delay placing items on the agenda requested by other commissioners. And then continue, all commissioners may suggest items for future agendas during regular meetings at the time designated for that purpose, and at other times. Any agenda item shall also be placed on the next meeting's agenda upon a vote of 4 or more board members. That's all existing language. And in addition, an item shall also be placed on the next on the next meeting agenda if a commissioner submits a written request signed by 4 or more commissioners to the administrator on or before noon, 7 days before the day of any meeting. So it removes the unreasonably language means nothing. What is unreasonable? That's purely subjective, and replaces it with an additional method where something can be placed on the very next agenda by having 4 commissioners sign a written request to do so. And the chair would have an option of accepting an email if he or she wished, but certainly 4 signed written statements, places it on the very next agenda, if submitted by noon of Wednesday.
I think there would be a lot of clarification with that, but.
Point of order,
but
Madam Chair, that does need to be submitted in writing.
But that.
Point of
would
order,
answer
Madam
the
Chair,
board.
is it being submitted in writing?
Could
No,
we
no,
just-
there's nothing wrong with
No,
that.
I
I'm just
would like
asking a
to-
point of
I
order.
would
Has
like-
it been submitted in writing for this?
I already said I had it in writing. You weren't
Okay,
listening.
thank you. No, I was listening. I thought you said you thought it had to be in writing, so I thought you hadn't.
Could you please stop?
Wrong, Madam Chair.
Would you, can we put this out a couple of meetings? Do you have any objection to that being put out a couple meetings? Because of, we have a.
You think it'll draw large debate?
No, I just know what, I know we're stacked up and
No,
need to
absolutely.
be out here by 6
Absolutely.
o'clock at the next meeting.
That's fine.
Unless, I don't know, I guess we need to look at the things that are up in the next meeting.
We can
A
always take-
change in the bylaws takes two meetings to vote. Actually, it has to be presented, and then there's 2 votes after that that it has to go through.
So we could keep the discussion minimal, so we can be out by 6 for the public hearing?
Yes.
Madam Chair, on the agenda items, could we work as a commission to possibly change our times a little bit so that we actually, there's a common tendency to schedule these meetings and then wind up being right up against another meeting, and then it justifies rushing through everything. So it's just kind of a hard, and it doesn't serve to give the taxpayer their time. Thank you.
We don't set the times for the budget committee. They set their own times. I guess that would be
But Budget Committee is through the month of September. That's it.
I guess I'm saying more in the line of, we have workshops and stuff that just conveniently get scheduled at 6 and truncate the ability for commissioners to talk while others are given ample opportunity. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn. I'm going to beat Terry.
Thank you. Ran out of room on my paper here for notes. Roland Poyer and Terry Kelly, and all in favor.
Opposed, I wish the minister reflect, my son is a fantastic young man. He's never a pawn. Thank you.